Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about What If Deku unleashed Todoroki's sentimental side part 1. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 2, comment down below and let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel and also share this video with your friends and check out the description in my playlist. The author of the story Suzariah from 𝗲𝗄𝗡. So let's start the video. The Endeavor Agency prides itself on realistic pro-hero experiences for its interns, and so it didn't take much time for 𝗬𝗪 to start patrolling on his own, off and on, under their tutelage. It was an easy decision, and his skill set excels when he runs alone, with no one around he can harm. He's taken on many villains by himself so far, but usually he's been in charge of spotting the criminals and contacting his father or his supporting sidekicks. It feels wrong not to intervene, but with their internship they need permission before entering certain situations. Sometimes Midoriya and Bakugo are there and the three of them take the villains in together. It's a satisfying routine, one he intends to perfect. He already knows he's capable of taking villains himself, but the students are required to be extra cautious with good reason. His routine starts with putting on his hero suit. He gives a nod to Midoriya and Bakugo as he leaves. They all start the same day, patrolling different parts of the city. His father gets ready as well, and watches them as they are about to set off. Good luck today, his father says in that way he's been doing. The one 𝗬𝗪 doesn't know what to do with. Both relief and irritation thrive in the presence of his father these days. He's distracted when he goes on patrol, and when he gets a call to stop a bank robbery in progress, he immediately responds, eager for something to take him out of his thoughts. There's not much detail for the job, but he's been feeling more comfortable with this, even more so when Midoriya or Bakugo join him. He moves quickly, deciding to not contact either of them for now. There is a particular benefit to being alone. Being around Midoriya lately has been perplexing. An unknown feeling is caught in his throat when he looks at his friend, one he doesn't want to address. He wants to say it's gratitude, but it's been getting harder to think about, like a vice grip in his chest when he thinks about it. He's not used to this kind of pain. It's entirely unfamiliar. His palms are warm. He's hesitant to get too close. Sometimes he feels like he can't look at Midoriya too long or his head starts to get fuzzy. Discomfort and warmth wrapped into a package that just concludes with distraction from what's in front of him. As he moves, he tries to unpack it, a habit he's picked up in recent weeks when he's on the move. He needs to, so he can focus. Did Midoriya say something to hurt him? That was his first thought, but he immediately dismissed it, as everything that comes out of his mouth seems to bring him to some greater epiphany. Empathy from an outside friend is a special kind of joy he's never known, but is quickly finding he couldn't live without. Now that he has it, he always comes to a conclusion that feels wrong, but it must be gratitude. He can't picture being hurt with something Midoriya said about his life, but gratitude towards Midoriya hasn't felt painful before. Besides, it isn't when Midoriya speaks that this strange pull has affronted him. It's much more random, sometimes just by being in proximity. Maybe he'll pay his mother another visit. He's scarce to talk about feelings with his friends, even now. But with Mom it feels natural, like he could tell her absolutely everything. He arrives on the scene for the robbery and puts the thought to the back of his mind and wills the strange grip on his chest to relax. He takes a deep breath, forcing himself to focus. He approaches the scene slowly, keeping low on the rooftops, and hears something like no civilian injuries, but in his earpiece before it cuts off. He identifies the culprit quickly. It's not like the villains to be sneaky. They usually like to make a name for themselves, advertise their name as a symbol of fear. Watching the events unfold from atop the roof across the bank, he notices he's somehow the first one to the scene. The culprit is in a burgundy suit and carrying a cane, and slowly transfers money one bag at a time, as if they don't have a care in the world. Todoroki watches for another moment, waiting for others, waiting for a sign of a quirk. He gets none. The person moves with loose limbs, maintaining a casual confidence in every step. They enter the bank, and a few moments later come back out carrying additional bags of what he assumes to be money. Villain is the only one here. I am going to engage. He lets the agency know. Quirk unknown, dispatch backup. Then he goes in, letting his eyes slide him down to the scene from atop the building. The villain catches sight of him. Todoroki is not equipped for sneak attacks at this angle, but what he lacks for indiscretion he's been making up for in speed. He moves to freeze the villain, and succeeds, but instead of a struggle he just hears laughter as the enemy is encased in ice. An uneasy feeling settles on his shoulders as he watches them. On closer look they wear a mask with a huge smile painted on its face and cartoonishly wide eyes. It's a disturbing picture, and the laughter echoes in his ears like angry horns. Endeavor's boy has come to see me personally. He must find me quite the threat, the villain says, his voice high in pitch and uncannily jovial. His form is lanky and 𝗬𝗪 tries to find where a quirk would come from. Typically villains with this level of confidence have something powerful up their sleeve. I don't think he even knows who you are, Todoroki retorts. Not that his father remembers many people. He thickens the ice surrounding him. "Ah, you think you've trapped me. A cautious boy." Most heroes would start gloating by now, especially the child of a pro hero. More laughter, disjointed and muffled through the ice. Pro hero mentality is all the same. It's about that ego you see. "But you've impressed me with your powers. Let me show you something." Todoroki prepares for an attack, throwing another layer of ice forward and shifting into a defensive stance. Nothing happens. The scene remains the same. The masked man stares at him, completely still. "Good, now pay attention." It starts barely noticeable, but Todoroki stills. The masked man's face slowly turns, and turns. He realizes it's much more like a clock ticking, an unsettling one, and he feels like he can hear the man's spine ticking like a clock as his neck twists at such a terrible angle until his face is upside down. An idea forms then, the ticking. Does he have a bomb? Or an exploding quirk? He can't know for sure, but he's not going to take any chances. He ignores the man and surges into the bank, searching for people to evacuate. A quick check confirms the villain remains encased in ice outside. How he continues to move Todoroki doesn't know. The bank appears empty and he calls out just in case. The ticking continues, loud and grotesque from where the man's head continues to twist with unnatural volume outside. There's a terrible cracking sound, even worse than before, and Todoroki moves to the entrance to find the villain walking in after him, still moving with an exaggerated relaxation. "You can relax, all the people are already gone. Except you." Another sound, a crash shuddering in his ears and a heat that rushes to the lobby. His head spins. An explosion, a bomb as he thought. He loses his stability and tumbles off his feet. He tries to listen desperately for sounds of civilians, but there's nothing except ringing in his ears. Blind, he activates his quirk to try and escape the building. He's not sure what the villain's quirk is, but it must be powerful to escape his ice so easily. When his skin touches fresh air, aggression surges through him. The uncertainty around this villain sets him off center, but knowing he has escaped his plans puts him back on the advantage. Knowing there's no civilians around means he can go all out, and his blood races at the realization. His fire rises as the villain strolls to meet him, that horrific smile practically glaring his way. Todoroki sends his flames, which dissipate before his eyes. "You know, I see you patrol with a few others sometimes. The green-haired one was on one of the sports festivals, wasn't he?" Todoroki tries to control the anger in his expression and fails. Something in his expression must show. The villain seems practically giddy. "I know the angry one yells a lot. They are hard not to notice." He continues. The mask tilts on the villain's face, as if mocking. Something alights in his face, and his flames burn hotter in preparation. "Oh, is that him right there?" Todoroki. Shadow glances behind him to see Midoriya standing in his hero uniform. Green hair wild and face blank. "Deku, what are you doing here?" He catches himself. Midoriya being here is good. They can capture the villain a lot easier with their compatibility in the field, but something about his friend's presence has him nervous. "I got called in." He starts and is cut off with the villain's booming laugh, and Todoroki grits his teeth. He shifts his stance back to the defensive, watching the villain warily. "Be careful, I don't know what his quirk is yet." Right. They move in sync as they always do, but Todoroki doesn't feel right. His confidence has faded and he feels like he's spinning, like he's going to vomit. "Be careful, he's strong. Stay safe," Todoroki warns, muscles tense and dizzy with worry. Midoriya looks at him, and something is so very wrong that it takes everything for him to not grab Midoriya and run. "I will. You too," he responds. Something about it isn't right. Midoriya is too stiff, he's going to get hurt. "That's not right though, Midoriya is strong." He breathes, he'll be fine. He can't remember the last time he truly felt such an acute lack of control. Maybe the last time was by his father's hand. His senses are trying to tell him something. Even his quirk feels like a wildfire beneath his skin. Flames billow and settle. Midoriya moves with speed, and before he realizes he's not ready, he and Midoriya start to collapse on the villain, giving him no escape. His hands are shaking. His face feels partially frozen. He can't remember the last time he's been so utterly terrified. Midoriya is strong, likely stronger than him even, but Todoroki wants to shove him to safety. He prepares his ice just in case for defense. Just as they move in, collapsing from opposing sides in a formation that has always worked, Todoroki's vision blurs and he's suddenly on the ground, dizzy with whatever is going on with the enemy's quirk. He focuses, and he needs to find Midoriya right now. His best friend is in danger. He can't see clearly, but that vice grip in his chest isn't the same. It's yanking him in a blind panic, and he knows something is wrong. "Where are you, Mido Deku?" he shouts, voice trembling and strained. His vision clears slightly and he can make out a shape in green kneeling before the villain, and Todoroki throws his ice out as fast as he can, blocking the villain from Midoriya with a giant ice wall. The villain leaps back at a distance. He forces his limbs into action, running despite the dizzying shifting of shapes and colors clouding his vision. He's got some sort of disorienting quirk. He croaks while his vision swims. He hopes his earpiece is still working. He nearly falls as he stumbles to Midoriya's prone form. He collapses in front of him, checking Midoriya for injuries. "Midoriya, wake up," he says, but Midoriya is completely still. Nothing happened. The villain just used a weird dizzy-causing quirk, but he's unconscious, and Todoroki listens to his instinct this time. He's out of his depth here. Time to let the other pros take care of it. He lifts Midoriya and starts propelling them with his ice as far away as he can. Something feels decidedly wrong about his friend's weight. There's a whirling in his stomach. It spurs him to stop and check on Midoriya, but there's no time. A sound, slick and heavy, fills his ears. It's so disgusting, he doesn't get very far. Midoriya's left arm falls right off. Todoroki has never stopped his ice so fast in his life. He crumbles to the ground, slowly setting Midoriya down as he looks at the gaping wound that has suddenly appeared at his best friend's side. His breathing quickens, mind spinning with shock and confusion. Seconds ago, Midoriya was solid in his arms. He knows he would have noticed if he was hurt so badly. He didn't cut him with the ice. What do I do? What do I? His breath is coming in short gasps. His training, he needs to calm down. Assess. The limbs blurs in his vision. He doesn't understand the repeating question of how flooding his mind. Does he cauterize the wound and reattach Midoriya's arm? No time to think. If he wants to save the limb, that's his only option. He moves to retrieve Midoriya's arm. It's bloody and alien in his arms. He nearly vomits as he carries it back to his body. He still doesn't know, doesn't understand how. What did the villain do? He looks like he's still breathing. Midoriya is still breathing. He sharpens his flame to a precise point and begins cauterizing Midoriya's arm back to his body. The tip of his flame moves quickly, and he's almost halfway done when the villain appears above him. Well, that won't stay there for very long. Too bad, all your hard work will go to waste. Todoroki creates a thick dome of ice around them, blocking the villain off from accessing them. He can't outrun him right now, but he can maybe buy them time. He can't lose Midoriya. He can't. He has to protect him. Except Midoriya isn't in the ice. He looks around desperately. He was just here so. Todoroki's fire heats up to extreme temperatures faster than ever, dispersing the ice instantly in an explosion. The villain is holding him, Midoriya limp in his arms. Todoroki makes a sound nearly inhuman and launches himself at the villain. Fire and ice swirling furiously around them. All thoughts of minimizing damage and ensuring civilian safety are absent from Todoroki's mind. He can only think of one single goal: to save Midoriya no matter the cost. He feels like his flesh is boiling. He's reaching his physical limits. But it doesn't matter as he attacks the villain again, making sure not to aim close to Midoriya. He places his ice around the villain, trying to give him less avenues of mobility. But no matter what he does, Todoroki feels like he can't close the distance. He somehow slips through just barely in time. There's not enough air in his lungs, and knows he'll pass out soon. Short gasps do nothing to ease him. The pained breaths only reiterate that he's helpless. He can't afford to lose here, but he's frozen and sweating. His quirk feels like it's in his throat, singeing him where it sits on the back of his tongue. His vision is swimming and fading with the temperature changes. But Midoriya, his best friend, isn't dead yet. He mostly cauterized the wound. He can still. The villain laughs again, like he can't stop himself. Manic like a man drunk on his power. Well, that was fun. Here's your friend back. He tosses his friend to the ground, limp limbs and dead weight hitting the ground with a resounding smack. A whimper escapes his throat, and his limbs somehow find a way to still move. He doesn't care if the villain can kill him right here. He has to know if Midoriya is even alive. Todoroki sees the rise and fall of his back and breathing and desperately tries to reach his body. Midoriya, you gotta stay with me. His throat bleeds out. His face feels wet and droplets fall onto Midoriya's hero suit. You're too important. He flips Midoriya onto his back and the sight before him takes away his voice. Despair fills him. His best friend is practically in pieces. Somehow he's still breathing. But Todoroki can see the hundreds of deep small cuts the villain has made into his body. He's still breathing. I can close these wounds. I can still. He tries to light a precise flame in his hands, but they're shaking, trembling with weakness. There's a sound he doesn't know filling his ears, someone sobbing. He needs to heal Midoriya. Midoriya needs a hospital. He needs the strongest healing quirk in the world. Todoroki can't move. His legs feel nearly frozen solid. If he can cauterize Midoriya's wounds, then unfreeze his legs, maybe he'll make it. The flame in his palm won't maintain heat, and the blood on Midoriya's face is so thick he can't see the cuts anymore. Todoroki clutches Midoriya to his chest. He never did find out what that feeling was. You got them? Midoriya asks the officers as they cuff a gang that called themselves the Legendary Rebels. The group didn't accomplish much. It formed 3 days ago and consisted of 3 villains. One whose quirk allowed him to fit through small crevices, another who could jump considerably high, and the third had claws and teeth that mimicked a lion. Thankfully, he was able to subdue all 3 when they tried to attack some businessmen. His earpiece buzzes and he lets them know he's free for another job. Todoroki is by himself at a bank robbery right now. Stopped hearing anything about 15 minutes ago. The villain's quirk is unknown. How fast can you get there? Izuku's on the complete opposite side of town, but he responds with, be there in 10. Todoroki can take care of himself, but the fact that the agency hasn't heard back gives him an uneasy feeling. It's only a minute or two later when the next buzz of the earpiece says, can you make it in 3? There's an emergency. Midoriya's eyes widen, and he kicks it up to a higher percentage. I'll be there in 3. He responds into the earpiece. Is Todoroki okay? He asks, feeling worry twist and turn in his stomach. It didn't sound like it, but he's alive. Didn't sound like it. Midoriya has never heard Todoroki sound openly not okay to anyone, especially on a mission. He prefers to convey his pain in quiet exchanges or slight tilts in his expression. Midoriya inhales slowly, tries not to worry too much. He has no way of knowing until he gets there. 𝗵𝗲 is going to beat him there. He sees the blinding fire moving at insane speeds above the rooftops, much faster than Deku's leaps he makes from roof to roof. He finally gets to the spot, a rooftop above the bank. He looks down below, searching for Todoroki and the villain. What he sees instead is utter carnage. The entire street is singed and ice-covered. Todoroki fought for his life. There's no sign of the villain here. Todoroki, however, is in the center, kneeling and head bowed. He drops below and joins 𝗵𝗲 at the edge of Todoroki's range. 𝗧𝗪𝗨, can you hear me? 𝗵𝗲 booms from a distance. On closer look, Midoriya can see his shoulders trembling and his legs frozen. He needs medical attention. He shouts, running to him. A visceral sound rips from 𝗧𝗪𝗨 and an ice crystal shoots past Deku's face, barely missing him. I don't think he can see us, 𝗵𝗲 tells him. Midoriya's eyes widen. Why can't he see us? His gaze is stuck to Todoroki's legs, terrified of how still his body looks. It's obvious he's pushed his quirk far beyond its limits. He tries to approach again, and is met with a resounding, stay back, don't you dare touch him. Small crystals of ice fly at him, but they are weak and Midoriya stills completely. He doesn't want to hurt Todoroki more. Todoroki, I don't think he can hear you either. He hasn't responded to the agency for a while now. 𝗵𝗲 says, something to do with the villain. He tries to think, analyze his words. Todoroki is hunched over, as if clutching something, obviously someone, by his words. His eyes and face are wild, grief-stricken, as if just sitting there is a plea to survive. But there's nothing there. The carnage around looks like it's all from Todoroki, just ice spikes and burnt ground. No sign of an opposing combat-based quirk. It doesn't take long for Midoriya to draw a conclusion. Where's the villain? Think they have a long-range illusion quirk? Deku asks, preparing his cowling. Illusion quirks, especially good ones, can be incredibly dangerous. It has driven thousands of people mad, both holders and victims of the quirks themselves. The hardest part is establishing to the victim that the reality they saw wasn't real, which, depending on the incident, can sometimes be impossible, especially when the quirk is just as vivid as reality. The knowledge that Todoroki is under the influence of one right now makes his stomach drop. 𝗵𝗲 nods solemnly. I'm going to go get him. 𝗵𝗲 shoots off like a bullet, his flames cutting through any ice 𝗧𝗪𝗨 makes on the way. He crouches next to his son, and he can see 𝗵𝗲 heat his legs out of where they are frozen to the ground. Menacing laughter fills the air, and Midoriya's eyes lock onto the culprit, standing on the rooftops in an unsettling mask. His coat billows behind him, and Midoriya reacts on instinct alone. He doesn't need to be told this is the villain. Midoriya jumps with as much power as he can muster to the roof and lands a punch dead center to the man's body. The man explodes in a rain of blood and Midoriya stares, utterly baffled. He didn't lose control of his entire power, did he? There's no way that blow would incinerate a human being. Did I kill him? How? He descends, staring at his hands in horror as blood and organs cover them. He closes his eyes. Realization dawns on him quickly and he shakes his head, feeling stupid. It's an illusion quirk. He just established this. He can't trust what he sees. The realization is followed by a confrontation with disorienting images and disturbing imagery being shoved into his eyes. He sees violence beyond his comprehension in vivid detail and he firmly shuts his eyes closed to block the imagery. He breathes a sigh of relief that the illusion quirk can't get past his closed eyes. Oh, you're getting the hang of it. This is where I take my leave then. Midoriya follows the voice with his eyes closed, but he doesn't have experience using his quirk without sight and instinctually opens his eyes. He's standing on a swirl of colors, a masked man standing at the edge of the vision. The painted-on smile on the mask seems to open. The smile wider and Deku suppresses a scream as the world spins. It's not real. He activates his quirk, preparing to head towards the sound of the voice. He closes his eyes again. He's about to launch himself. He can hear him, growing fainter. Stop, you idiot. He feels an arm on his shoulder, and when he opens them again, Bakugo is there, looking uncharacteristically quiet. Snap out of it, Deku. Bakugo says plainly, lacking his usual vigor. It pacifies him and he feels a clawing worry as his eyes search for Todoroki. He nods to Bakugo, feeling tears sting at the edges of his eyes in frustration. Where's the villain? Midoriya asks, feeling the strain in his hands from how tightly his fists are clenched. Bakugo shakes his head. Gone. He nods. He's not sure how to chase this villain. Maybe with Aizawa. Midoriya hears his name in a familiar, trembling shout. His legs are shaking. Adrenaline already in full force, and responds to the call in full cowling. Legs struggling to a stop in front of a team of paramedics. Let me go. We can still save him. Midoriya. 𝗏𝗏's distraught voice echoes through the empty streets, raspy and broken. He's battered to hell, clothes torn, large wounds, legs beaten with obvious frost and burn damage. But alive, heaving a breath, holding it as he looks upon his friend, willing tears not to fall. He steps into view and 𝗏𝗏's eyes are wild with horror only he can see. Even as Midoriya stands right there, he's blind to it, watching some phantom reality. Midoriya bites his lip to keep the tears back just a little longer. He walks slowly up to 𝗏𝗏 and leans in close. I'm right here, you don't need to worry, I'm fine, he says softly, placing a gentle hand to Todoroki's battered face. His eyes are still glazed over, eyes looking distantly beyond him, and he knows Todoroki can't see him, maybe can't even hear him. Todoroki lunges, and Endeavor holds his son down with the paramedics. It's not real, 𝗏𝗏. Midoriya is fine. You need to let a visceral sob erupts from the usually reserved hero. He watches in shock as Todoroki clutches his chest and wails. The temperature fluctuates around them erratically, as if Todoroki is manipulating the temperature but can't get it intense enough to produce either flames or ice. Midoriya has never seen him this emotional, this utterly destroyed. Endeavor barely twitches with his son's struggle and turns to the paramedics. We need to sedate him. He's still under the influence of a quirk. Izuku doesn't know what to do, but pulls Todoroki into a loose hug. Hey, it's okay, it's going to be okay, Midoriya tells him through his own tears. He places a gentle hand on his back, mindful of his burns, the quirk-riddled damage on his body. It takes a moment to realize that Todoroki did all of this to himself. The illusionist just had to show him the right images. Midoriya can only imagine what he saw that resulted in this kind of desperation written in every muscle on his body, with the way he was calling his name. 𝗏𝗏 went this far trying to protect him, even if it wasn't real. The thought puts a burning in his throat, an ache in his chest. He wants to hold him tighter, but he can't without causing him pain. Midoriya is startled by Endeavor's hand on his shoulder. We're taking him to the hospital now. He takes a step away, letting 𝗏𝗏 lean into the hands of the medic. Reluctant as his hands slowly part from him, he wants to assure him, but there's no recognition in his eyes, no acknowledgement of his presence. Everyone must notice it. Even Endeavor looks different, his flames dancing in an erratic, uncontrolled motion. Anybody could tell he's upset, but Midoriya is sure the strange turn in his eyes is for his son. Midoriya doesn't know how to feel about this care coming from him. Not when 𝗏𝗏 is hurt, and hurt is all his father's ever seemed to give him. That look, this Endeavor is much different than the one he met at the sports festival. That man would have tossed 𝗏𝗏 aside, told him not to be so weak. He's sure of it. But this man, that look of urgency he has seen before in the faces of his friends, saw it mirrored in his own. It's what allows him to step aside, and he lets Endeavor take over to get 𝗏𝗏 the care he needs. He kneels in front of his son, and Izuku cannot hear the words being said. But 𝗏𝗏 is just as unresponsive, and a stricken look doesn't look right on such a grizzled man, but it's there. We should get him to the hospital, Izuku says, voice unsteady. The ambulance is here, let's get him to safety. He already looks so worn. He's surprised 𝗏𝗏 doesn't fall into sleep, but his friend's eyes are glued to a spot somewhere in the distance. Midoriya looks to see where he's looking and knows he will see nothing. But he tries to imagine it. Is some other Midoriya being projected there? Maybe Bakugo too? Did Todoroki just have to watch all his friends die in front of him? That would be the trigger for himself. That would certainly put him in the same exact state. He tries to imagine for a moment if the situations were reversed. Would he have realized? Probably not. Illusion quirks aren't common, and Midoriya showing up here would be expected behavior. 𝗏𝗏 eventually eases into sedation, his body too exhausted to put up any fight. He mentioned your name. In case he wakes up, you should ride in the ambulance with us, one of the medics says to him. He agrees. The #1 hero gives him a nod that he thinks means take care of him. Midoriya settles beside him, loosely taking 𝗏𝗏's hand. He's in a deep sleep, the sedatives doing their work. It's more and more obvious that he'll have a few scars from this, but thankfully he'll live. Illusions are powerful things. Trying to picture what 𝗏𝗏 might have seen is easy enough. What would cause him to react so dramatically? Midoriya has already been in a similar situation. He remembers the pain he felt when Bakugo was taken. He was shown a brief vision by this villain, some atrocity on human life, but nothing specific and only a flash. If there had been time for the villain to formulate a vision, that's probably what sold 𝗏𝗏 of reality. It would make sense for any of them to be there. He wonders what he'll say when he wakes. 𝗏𝗏's been quiet recently, which is saying something as he's quiet to begin with. Izuku briefly wondered if it was something related to him, because Todoroki has been giving him looks. Nothing distinct, just different than usual. It feels like Izuku is suddenly a walking puzzle, the way Todoroki looks with such a thoughtful expression. Maybe that's how the villain ended up producing such an illusion, could see into his mind. Though such a possibility is low. They could have just watched the news and seen their faces. They haven't exactly been low-key with the Class 1 publicity. You'll have to take notes once the villain is captured. This kind of quirk unveils an entire new threat to them that could be deadly for anyone, even the most experienced, especially if it does conclude with the villain being able to leverage past memories and experiences. That Todoroki was so hurt by it is evidence enough, when he's probably the closest experience-wise to a pro hero among all of them. He'd be able to compete with some of the best even now. He squeezes his hand and automatically seeks out his heartbeat for reassurance. They've had too many close calls in their brief time at UA. Todoroki is close to him in a certain way the others are not, a special way. They've shared vulnerability, secrets left unsaid, saved each other on more than one occasion. He'll be okay. The EMT across the bench reassures. Doc has a strong healing quirk here. Midoriya's smile is wobbly. Right. Thanks. I think I'm more worried about his mental wounds right now. The paramedic nods. That's the worst part, isn't it? Midoriya nods. Yeah, they are. Todoroki wakes slowly, his consciousness rising from a thick cloud of random images. White, green, red. Images take shape eventually, and he remembers who he is, his thoughts no longer incoherent. He feels a warmth in his palm. He squeezes, not knowing who is there. Shoo. It takes a second, but he registers the voice as 𝗵𝘃𝗻 and finally manages to open his eyes. The lights are blinding, and he's met with the sensation of stiff blankets and incessant beeping of his heartbeat on a monitor. 𝗬𝗨, take it easy, you were hurt pretty bad, she informs him. Most of his body still isn't responding right. His legs feel pinned and arms sluggish. You used your quirk way beyond your limits, 𝗵𝘃𝗻 says. She looks more disheveled than usual. Her hair is in disarray and it's clear she hasn't slept. Still, she's warm and comforting as she always has been. But there's a pit in his stomach. 𝗬𝗨's eyes tighten as a memory comes back. Vile and so horrible he starts to heave. 𝗵𝘃𝗻 is thankfully ready with something in her hands, a bag. Todoroki vomits up what little contents are in his stomach. Shoo Midoriya. Midoriya is gone. Could they have possibly saved him? He was practically disintegrated in his arms by the end. Cut too many different ways. He doesn't remember, but he feels like he knows. There's no way he could have lived. He can't help but hope. He's dreading the question. But he has to know. He croaks, closing his eyes. He can't ask. He can't. His breathing comes faster, and then machines are blaring and 𝗵𝘃𝗻 is speaking, but he can no longer hear. What was that feeling he had? He wanted to talk to him. If he had talked to him, he'll never get to tell him. He'll never get to tell him. His mind rings. And he is so confused because what was it? What was so important that he had to tell Midoriya? Did Midoriya know how much he'd done for him? How much his words meant? How big of an impact he left? His world's practically on a different axis thanks to him. Even his entire family has been changed from the gravity of only a few of Midoriya's words. Did he know that before? He wants so badly to be wrong, but how could anyone live through that? 𝗬𝗨, I need you to calm down. What's wrong? Are you in pain? 𝗵𝘃𝗻 is holding his face in her hands, gentle and soothing. Tears fall from his eyes, and he tries to breathe, but only gasping comes out. Did Midoriya make it? He forces out, desperation leaking out of every pore. She tilts her head, eyes squinting. He wasn't injured. Todoroki shakes his head. He was dying in my arms, but I don't remember. Shit, let me go get him. He was just here. He's rarely heard 𝗵𝘃𝗻 swear, and though he's confused, her certainty is calming. How is it possible she can just go get him? There's some commotion, and then Midoriya is standing there. Whole, complete, by some miracle he is in one piece. You wake up somehow in the only 5 minutes I leave your side to give your sister some privacy, Midoriya says, tone almost scolding, sounding shockingly normal. Todoroki is not sure what his expression looks like, because he's never felt such all-encompassing relief. His tears flow faster, his breathing slows. The tightness in his chest doesn't so much as release. It fires something wonderful and awful all at once in his body. He's not sure what's happening. Midoriya is somehow alive, and he's gasping for air and sobs destroy any semblance of calm he holds. Seeing his state, Midoriya rushes over to the side of his bed, eyes tight in concern. I know you saw some things related to me. I'm sure they weren't pleasant. He pauses, his hand reaching out. He stops. Can I hug you? There's a pause, and Todoroki finally meets his eyes. They are wide and bright, a swirl of concern and empathy. He's never been one to show physical affection, at least not easily. But Midoriya is here, and solid where it feels like just a moment ago he was gone. Its fingers reach out and grip Deku's uniform, and finding purchase in the fabric, it solidifies that uncertainty of reality in his mind. Todoroki pulls him into the fiercest hug he's ever given, arms shaking with the effort. It's worth it. Midoriya's alive. He's alive. How is this? He cuts off on a gasp. his lungs hurting from the words and strained emotion in his throat. Squeezing him on the hug, Midoriya replies, "I was never hurt. The villain has an illusion quirk. They can make you see whatever they want. It wasn't real." The only possible explanation for why Midoriya is standing in front of him. He blinks back, the memories coming through vividly. He felt every hit. Midoriya sounded ever so slightly off, but otherwise the image is perfect. Nonetheless, Todoroki ducks his head into Izuku's shoulder. "Not real, I'm an idiot." Midoriya leans back to meet his eyes. "You're not. I didn't see much, but I got a taste. If I hadn't suspected before, I would have believed what I was seeing too." 𝗪𝗪 believed every second. Even knowing that it's not real, the memory still sits like a heavy weight in his mind, and he can't seem to get rid of the unease in his gut. The image of what Izuku would look like if he was cut into pieces right in front of him is stuck at the forefront of his mind. He pushes it away, focusing on the hero in his arms. Safe. Todoroki's hand moves up instinctually to cup Izuku's cheek. Midoriya's cheeks turn red, but he doesn't move. "You're okay." Yeah, I'm okay," Midoriya stammers, but he's smiling. He's so tired and all of his muscles finally relax. Settling back into the hospital bed behind him, Midoriya eases him back, and a warmth seeps into every point of contact they shared. He's not usually this emotional or affectionate, but he thinks he gets an excuse for the day he's had. His bones ache to their core, especially his legs, but he doesn't care. He feels so thankful. He blinks slowly, watching Izuku as he hovers with concern. Todoroki thinks it's strange how normal he looks. Hair in its usual green disarray, eyes drawn into worry as they often are. Midoriya cares a lot about his friends. It's maybe his most defining trait. Maybe that's why he believed what he was seeing. Izuku sees him watching and moves to take Todoroki's hand. The swirl of tension and anxiety eases from him. His mind and body, which felt like the string of a bow pulled to its breaking point, finally rests. There is surprise and warmth at the contact, but his eyes feel heavy, limbs dead weights now. He grasps consciousness to make eye contact with Midoriya. That unknown emotion makes itself known when Midoriya squeezes his hand. "Don't worry, 𝗪𝗪, you can sleep." It's the first name, spoken with a soothing fondness. That does it. A hazy realization dawns on him. "I think I might be in love with you." Midoriya's eyes widen and he stills. Todoroki's eyes close. Midoriya doesn't move for a long time, just watches as Todoroki immediately passes out after dropping a confession on him. Was it the drugs? Was that why he said that? 𝗪𝗪 is definitely acting weird. He's never this vulnerable, this affectionate. But that could also just be the trauma he's endured. Midoriya knows he'd be in an even worse state in his position. He'd probably cling to 𝗪𝗪 the second he woke up and cry for weeks. He slowly extracts his hand from Todoroki's, trying not to wake him. He must be tired, falling asleep that quickly. In the middle of a confession, Izuku bends to the floor, covering his face in his hands. What's he supposed to do with that? There's no mistaking it. 𝗪𝗪 said in love, as in romantic affection. There's a chance it might just be the sedative making him crazy. It could also be the scenario 𝗪𝗪 was just in, making his emotions towards Midoriya run high. There's no way someone like 𝗪𝗪 could really like him that way, right? If Todoroki is serious, what does that mean? How does he feel about 𝗪𝗪? That sends his mind into a frenzy. He inhales deeply, willing himself to calm down. It doesn't matter now anyway. He just needs to be there for 𝗪𝗪 right now. That's his only mission. He'll be recovering for a while. They'll talk when he's more stable, maybe have a real conversation. Still his hands pull and tug at his hair, running circles around the words, remembering the way Todoroki clutched him. Grip painful in desperation. The warmth was both emotional and physical, because he had been hot with his quirk. Burning. He can say for certain that it's not his quirk now that has his face feeling like it's next to a bonfire. Midoriya sits there for a while, just staring, running 1,001 scenarios about what it all means. His health, envisioning the horrors of the quirk. Fayumi and Endeavor return to visit eventually, and 𝗪𝗪 does manage to wake up again briefly. He's still obviously out of it, and Fayumi tumbles into a hug too. Natsuo is on his way. Midoriya hovers in the background. Todoroki's eyes have a glaze to them and he's not sure if he knows Midoriya is there. Earlier they were clear. He wonders if the painkillers are getting to him. It feels like he's intruding, so he leaves briefly to call his mom to tell her he's coming home to her today instead of the dorms. He contacts Aizawa to clear it, and he is given the go-ahead. "Do you think this villain could follow me? Or Todoroki?" Midoriya asks, needing reassurance. Aizawa sighs over the phone. "Don't think so. I'll be patrolling tonight. Half the city will be looking for him anyway. That is if the moment Endeavor is done here he doesn't hunt the villain down. Go to the dorms tomorrow though. Todoroki is surrounded by pro-heroes. He'll be fine." "Of course," Midoriya replies. He hangs up. Burgundy coat, an illusion quirk, and a strange bank robbery. The villain certainly made a show of his brief crime, and got away with it with the #1 hero and his son on his tail. It's unheard of for an unknown villain to do that. League of Villains maybe. Clearly the villain was experienced, or studied the area very well. He knows how to weaken his opponents. Endangering those they care about is definitely a strategy that makes sense if one wants to get away. How long will Todoroki be seeing those images in his mind? Midoriya feels uneasy just remembering the sensation of his fist bursting through flesh, as if he really had punched a hole through a human being, and saw their blood pool across his hands. It's not like Midoriya isn't prepared to kill, if he utterly has to, but something about that vision preyed on that deep insecurity, that lack of control of his quirk, of people getting hurt beyond repair because he lost control for a single moment at max power. The image feels like it actually happened in his mind, even though he knows it wasn't real. This illusion villain certainly knows what they are doing. He bites the corner of his lip, trying to think of what to do. 𝗵𝗃's agency is certainly still after the villain. A sigh escapes him. For tonight, there's not much he can do. But he'll go home to his mom, rest and try not to worry. Fail at not worrying most likely. He decides to visit Todoroki one more time before heading out. Laying eyes upon him alive may at least give him some peace of mind. Turning the corner, walking back to 𝗪𝗪's room, there's some commotion from inside. 𝗪𝗪, you can't walk right now. You need to not be on your legs. Midoriya hears and he lets himself in, ready to force Todoroki back to bed to care for himself. Todoroki is struggling with his sister, trying to stand from the bed, but ultimately not succeeding. I just need to check, Midoriya. Todoroki says his name with a special brand of relief. He did the same earlier, and it sent a shiver through him as it does now. I think I'm in love with you. He feels his face heat, painfully aware of it. Too aware of Fayumi and 𝗵𝗃 standing there hearing Todoroki say his name like that. Is everything okay? Sorry for coming in without knocking, he says reflexively, trying to quell his nerves. No, you're welcome in Midoriya. I think that's actually why Shu wanted to get up here. She gives Todoroki a stern look, even though he didn't say so. Todoroki lowers his head, looking sheepish under his sister's authority. Midoriya. 𝗵𝗃 interrupts, all strength and authority in his voice. Midoriya straightens, meeting his gaze evenly. I need to speak with you. Alarmed, he turns to 𝗵𝗃. Of course, he responds, hoping he sounds strong. Todoroki looks angry at his dad, his face scrunched and eyes accusing. Midoriya smiles at him. Don't worry, he tries to tell him, mouthing the words when 𝗪𝗪 meets his eyes. He's clearly more coherent than earlier. His eyes are clear when he tilts his head in reply. 𝗵𝗃 leads him down the pristine hall and finds a private sitting room unattended. They sit there, and his hands are clammy beneath his gloves. 𝗵𝗃's eyes on him are heavy. Even when they're training it's like that, but this is different. Midoriya knows he's brought him here about his son, but in what form he's not sure. I'm going to ask a favor of you, Midoriya. Okay, he replies easily. What's the favor? He's not sure what he's expecting. 𝗵𝗃 doesn't keep him waiting. Keep a very close eye on 𝗪𝗪 for me. That's a given. He replies immediately, his voice sounding indignant to his own ears. He's always distrustful of 𝗵𝗃 on instinct. He tortured 𝗪𝗪 for so many years. It's hard to believe he's turning over a new leaf. But he backtracks. Of course, I'd do that anyway. 𝗵𝗃 sighs, tension easing. No. 𝗪𝗪 can handle the physical beating, but I'm concerned about his emotional well-being this time. I've not seen him like that before, and since his stress pertains to you, I'd like you to keep a close eye on him. He says this all with a gruff uncertainty. Midoriya agrees easily. He always watches his best friend's back. That's ingrained into him since they fought at the tournament together. Whether it's guarding Todoroki from 𝗵𝗃 himself or from his personal terrors, Midoriya would happily be there for him. I understand. Know that I always have Todoroki's well-being in mind. 𝗵𝗃 nods gravely. You are aware of the situation. 𝗪𝗪 doesn't trust me. I deserve that. But I see he has others he can rely on. Midoriya watches 𝗵𝗃's expression very closely, looking for any sign of this being a manipulation, but his expression seems genuinely remorseful. Midoriya keeps his tone carefully neutral. Yes, he can always rely on me. A pause. Please continue supporting him in his own decisions. Nothing can go wrong if 𝗵𝗃 wants to turn over a new leaf. Whether he's forgiven or not is completely up to 𝗪𝗪. Midoriya certainly won't, maybe even if 𝗪𝗪 does. But he can agree amicably when 𝗵𝗃 tries to do something like this, for 𝗪𝗪's benefit without any strings attached. There's no angle here, where this somehow is a manipulation to gain trust. He gains nothing from this personally. Midoriya stands, feeling small under 𝗵𝗃's harsh eyes. And the brief meeting concludes. They return to 𝗪𝗪's room, and he's still sitting upright, staring at the door with half-lidded eyes that brighten the second he walks in. Midoriya swallows thickly. The day has been too much to unpack his best friend's words. He'll need to take time with him. He's grateful he's going home to his mom tonight. Midoriya, is everything all right? Todoroki asks. Did my father say anything? He can be. He trails off. Midoriya raises a hand to stop him. It's okay, he's just worried about you. I know that's probably. Yeah, Todoroki concludes the topic there, so he didn't bother you. Not at all. He smirks. It's shocking, I know. A small smile tilts at the edge of Xiaodo's lips. It's strange, uncomfortable in its own way, but better than what it was. Midoriya nods in agreement. Where's 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵? She left for a second. Probably grabbed Dad while she was out. Trying to give us some space, I think. Space. Midoriya feels uncomfortably warm, the heat in his face returning. He finds it hard to look Todoroki in the eye. Do you need anything? Todoroki leans, catching Midoriya's eyes. It's impossible not to return the gaze, at least without seeming like he's deliberately avoiding it. So he holds his eyes, staring wordlessly. Midoriya's face feels like it's blazing. Todoroki. He blinks, face blank. You're very tired, aren't you? You had a long day too. I'm okay. Midoriya lies. It's the one thing he can lie about well. You should head back to the dorms. Midoriya hesitates, but then smiles. I'm actually going to my mom's tonight. He twists his hands, then thinks about what Todoroki has seen. Unless you need me here, he adds. Todoroki shakes his head. I'll be fine, don't worry. Go be with your mom and get some rest. Now it's Midoriya's turn to watch closely. His eyes track from where Todoroki is hooked up to an IV, and all the patches over his body trying to stabilize his body temperature. Most importantly, he forces himself to make eye contact, searching for signs of distress and finds none. Though he knows Todoroki is an expert on hiding things like that. You're okay. Promise. He watches, looking for a sign of a crack in the facade. Todoroki's lips curl up slightly. Just very tired. I'll sleep the night. Go be with your mom. A fair point. Xiaodo will need to sleep for a long time before he can move freely again. Call me if you need anything. Midoriya adds. Don't worry, I'm fine. Midoriya hesitates, taking in Todoroki's expression. He seems more himself, but underneath that strong exterior, Midoriya knows the powerful emotion he feels, that vulnerability he hides. He looks even more so now, even still, beneath white hospital blankets and machines that monitor his life. His emotional wall, however. Earlier Todoroki had held him like a dying man, desperate and needy. He's never seen him like that. He wonders, does Todoroki crave that kind of affection all the time, and just holds it back? Was that just because he thought Midoriya was dead, or was it more like an explosion of cooped-up affection? He's not sure, but he decides he doesn't care, because he wants a hug right now, not like the one earlier. He wants reassurance that Todoroki is okay. He leans in, arms open, giving Todoroki an out. He's almost expecting a gruff, embarrassed dismissal. But Todoroki's small smile grows into something more genuine and maybe even a little shy. He accepts the hug, returning the affection firmly. But nothing like earlier. This is polite, but warm, and Midoriya will happily accept it. They loosen their embrace and he heads for the door. I'll come by tomorrow. You don't have to. Todoroki tells him. Nope, I'm coming by. That earns him an eye roll. Okay, see you tomorrow. The single phrase is said softly, in that tone. The same tone he spoke in earlier. Midoriya nearly squeaks as he leaves, speed walking away from Todoroki's room. He keeps his head down, face blazing as he rushes to the exit. He somehow doesn't encounter any other Todorokis on his way out. For that at least, he's grateful. He's so screwed. Hospitals are always terrible. The entire atmosphere makes Todoroki feel antsy. He can't stop fidgeting and all he wants to do is leave. His temperature can't seem to balance out. He alternates from sweating to freezing constantly. Relax, Shu. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵 enters, holding a coffee. You won't be able to sleep like that. I don't think I'll be sleeping. He's not even sure he wants to. Flashes still appear in his mind's eye of the illusions. He tries to cling to the image of Midoriya's embarrassed departure instead. He's fine. Todoroki is in love with him. A heavy sigh escapes him. What's wrong? Nothing. Todoroki answers, voice hard. The feelings have been named. It feels spot on. He's certain that is it. The problem. That nervousness he feels around Midoriya has been placed as his own unease about his affection. There's definitely something wrong. 𝗵𝗲𝗄𝐵 is getting tired of his antics more and more, and she has a long nerve. Not wrong, just inconvenient, he says to her, giving her a look that he hopes conveys leave it. Inconvenient. He nods, not making eye contact with her. Todoroki can feel her eyes on him, studying. It doesn't take long. Is it about Midoriya? His head whips in her direction. Are you psychic? She laughs and waves him off. No, of course not, but you sounded funny when you were talking to him. Which makes sense, but it wasn't in the way I expected. I've never heard you sound like that. Like what? She laughs lightly, as if it all isn't something earth-shattering for him. You sounded so infatuated. Todoroki feels a warmth that has nothing to do with his quirk on his cheeks. Is it because of what happened? She probes tentatively. It's understandable to feel some intensity towards him right now. You said you saw him, He cuts her off, preferring to hear no reminders. No, I didn't know what it was. Until Midoriya said his name in a way that he wanted. That he craved. He didn't know he wanted it until it was said. Then it was clear as day. He doesn't remember anything after the realization, just that he was so tired. and Midoriya was so warm, and that Midoriya cared for him in a way that no one else ever has. Life or death situations like that can make you confront emotions you've been denying too, 𝗵𝘃𝗲 suggests, but trails off. I don't think I was denying, they were just unfamiliar. They are. He pauses, contemplative, hard to identify. His sister nods. That's understandable. Do you know what the feeling is then? He grumbles, and his discontent seems to answer the question for her. The smile that slowly forms on her face as if against her will is too mischievous for his liking. She's going to torture him. Are you going to tell him? I don't know. Probably not. 𝗵𝘃𝗲 makes a vague sound of displeasure, and now he is fighting a smile. They've never really had moments like this, despite the pain in his limbs. The wildly unusual normalcy of his sister's concern on this topic makes him almost want to laugh. Why not? He cares about you, obviously. I could ruin it, in more ways than one. There's no way he'd feel the same. Even if he did, what if he stops himself, still feels that ball of emotion in his throat? The events of today have brought forth a new fear. What if what? He hesitates. He doesn't share this much. But he wants to. He wants to hear her perspective. What if I put him in danger? 𝗵𝘃𝗲 scoffs. There's no way he's going to be in any more danger than he is now. From what you've told me about him, he's the kind of hero who plans on throwing himself into danger at the smallest chance of saving someone. She leans forward and jabs a finger at him. If anything, I think you need to ask yourself the opposite question too. Are you okay with being in danger for him? His answer is immediate. Definitely. I'd much prefer if he didn't always jump in alone. Well, there you go. 𝗵𝘃𝗲 smiles victoriously. You've managed to figure out how you feel and probably how he feels in one go. How did I figure out how he feels? He asks, incredulous. He has no additional information. She sighs heavily, and Todoroki can tell he's in for it. Deku throws himself into danger for people. Cares about you. What's not clicking? You do the same thing, 𝗬𝗪. He probably feels the same way you do, at least about his friends soloing villains. He's in just as much danger whether you are romantically interested or just friends. And he certainly has a strong friendship with you. About whether he likes you romantically or not ... You're going to have to ask him. His face heats. The idea of asking him is agonizing. He knows he'd get rejected. Midoriya would probably try to be nice about it. Plus, he's not even sure if that's what he wants. Is it enough to just have feelings for someone and do nothing? Can I just not ask him that? He makes a face. 𝗵𝘃𝗲 shakes her head. If that's what you really want. But she pauses, stares hard into his eyes. She can read him, maybe not easily, but she can. It doesn't seem like you really want that, 𝗬𝗪. It just looks like you've assumed you have everything figured out and already decided what he wants. It's a familiar behavior, one that makes him reflexively cringe at his own actions. He's been doing that this whole conversation, and he knows it's something he does. He is always assuming a lot about Midoriya, about how people feel. It always feels unsettling, the thought of even asking. Normally, when he wants to know someone's thoughts, he waits to see. He can be very patient, or he waits until he forgets he wanted to know at all. She places a gentle hand on his shoulder. I really don't think you want to do that. He shakes his head and leans into her touch, finding his sister's presence reassuring. You're probably right. Pretty sure I'm right this time. Todoroki nods, head slow and heavy. The exhaustion has been sneaking up on him. You haven't been sleeping well, she notes. Her eyes are sympathetic. The illusion quirk. Yes, he whispers, voice tight. You saw Midoriya in the illusion? I'd rather not talk about that. Trying to forget it. She nods and quiets with a concerned tilt to her eyes. If you do want to talk, you can tell me anytime. He's talked more today than he has in months, and he hasn't even been awake long. He smiles at her, despite the heavy weight that urges a more despairing expression. I know. 𝗵𝘃𝗲 pats his head lightly. He'd normally balk at the gesture, but he finds it reassuring now. His sister cares. Don't try to get up without help again. You're pretty messed up this time. 𝗵𝘃𝗲 says sadly. It's nothing she hasn't seen or heard about before. But he wonders how he must look for her to meet his eyes like that. She used to look away when he was hurt. I've been worse. I'll be fine. She nods. She knows firsthand he has. Midoriya welcomes her son home with a warm hug as she always does. And her ever-present worry is temporarily abated. It's so nice having you home. Why the sudden visit? Hard day. Her son replies, unusually short. What happened? She asks in a tone that guarantees a certain follow-up. His face is hard. There's a tough front that he's put up for a long time. Ever since he joined UA really, he cries less than ever before. But there's something wounded about his expression now. He tries to speak, but that emotion in her son is unraveling quickly. They are entirely alike after all. It's not long before the cracks start to form. She knows this is her son's soft place to fall. His lip wobbles, and tears flow slowly down his cheeks. She opens up her arms for another hug. What happened, baby? Izuku starts crying audibly, his voice squeaking in that way he does when he's trying his hardest not to cry. He falls into her hug and it's just like old times. Friend got hurt, and some other things. I don't know what's going to happen, Mom. Izuku sniffles. Izuku leans out of the hug and she pats his back, soothing. Is your friend going to make it, honey? He nods furiously. He's okay physically. He's in the hospital. The way he got hurt, it kinda had to do with me. His tone is both questioning and embarrassed, as if he's afraid to admit it. With tears streaming down his face while he says it, she almost wants to laugh at how flustered her son looks. How'd that happen? I didn't directly do anything, I guess. But the villain knew we were friends, and Izuku stops, expression tight. He got hurt defending me. Sort of. Whoever this friend is, she is grateful for them. There's nothing more she wants than someone out there protecting her boy while he throws himself head-on into danger. I'm glad he's okay and that you're okay. You're worth defending. I'm sure it's not your fault. He backtracks and she now understands the confused tilt to head. It's not my fault. It's just a situation. A situation. He nods. Why do you feel guilty then, Izu? She seems to have hit the nail on the head as Izuku goes off. Because he defended me and he got hurt. It's going to be hard for a while. I know I wouldn't be okay for a long time if it was me in his place. I know it's not my fault, but the tears start flowing again. I don't want him to be hurting because he tried to save me. She pats her son's head. His hair is still gritty from his high-speed journey home. He was willing to take the risk. What really happened? She urges, unsure how to offer comfort with him vaguely dancing around the issue. He scarcely avoids telling her something, and it sends a knot of worry through her chest. I know you can't tell me everything, but I think I need a little context. There is a pause for a few seconds. Izuku mutters to himself before he speaks. It was an illusion quirk. I wasn't really there. Villain knew from seeing us around. He tried saving an image of me and failed. He's torn up about it, physically and emotionally. It's a terrible image. Her eyes widen. The boy saw her son die most likely. Just the suggestion of it makes tears almost come to her own eyes. She's managed to get a little better at managing how she feels and keeps them from forming. Make sure you visit him tomorrow, honey. Just be there for him. Her son is strong. He nods, voice wobbly. I know, I will. Do you want to watch one of your favorite All Might movies? Even being familiar with the real All Might, she's happy her son still radiates happiness at the mention of his all-time favorite hero. I haven't seen the second documentary of his time in America in a while. She laughs. I know the one. I'll put it on. Todoroki tries his best not to sleep. 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝐵 and his dad left a while ago, though he looked like he was going to go patrol. His legs are still too stiff. He can walk with very short bursts, but one of the nurses catches him trying and urges him to lay down. Bed rest will speed his recovery along after all. He's expected to make a full recovery, but he's been warned of some kind of quirk control loss for days or even weeks. Since his quirk is offensive, he's been asked not to go anywhere without an escort, especially one capable of culling his quirk is ideal. The lack of control is the worst part. The possibility he could just start a fire without knowing is terrifying on its own. It even scared him when he was in control. The thought that he was capable of destruction with ease frightened him. Seeing it in action didn't help his fear. He can feel the heat just behind his fingertips, waiting. It's not usually like that. He's never been like this, feeling like he's out of his mind. He's never had a reason to be so illogical. The images enter easily, and suddenly Midoriya is being torn apart just behind his eyes. It's not real, he says aloud. The firmest reminder he can give. It's been happening with increasing frequency. He feels like he could puke, but there's nothing left in him. The swirling pit in his stomach causes his right hand to heat just at the thought, pushing past the paper-thin control. His instincts flaring his quirk fast, even when he's paying attention to it, attempting to keep it at bay. He inhales deep, trying to calm himself, but the flames are rising quickly up his arm. He activates his ice, his left side cooling his body into a relaxed state. The heat always did make him more anxious. The flames abate, a steam entering the hospital room. A siren goes off, indicating quirk activation. The doctor that rushes into the room is unfamiliar. He hasn't met them yet. Ah, sir, I see you're struggling with your quirk, but looks like you got it under control, the doctor says, phrasing it like a question. Todoroki pauses for longer than is comfortable. Yes, excellent. That's very good. I'm sure you'll feel stronger every day. Just call if you need me though, if you feel it getting out of hand. He gestures to the call button, and 𝗬𝗪 doesn't say anything more. He doesn't know what to do with this casual error either. It seems a lot more urgent an issue. Don't worry too much. You aren't the first patient with symptoms related to quirk control. It's very common. That doesn't ease his mind as much as it should. I will, get some rest. The doctor finishes with an awkward glance. He exits slowly, and as abruptly as he arrived. 𝗬𝗪 winces, his quirk still causing him pain to use. They told him if he has the control, not to use it at all, but that's a tall order. It feels like a combination of he needs to use it even more and that he has no fuel left in the tank to even do so. Like he's running on fumes. This is the first time he's had such explosive side effects to overusing his quirk. He knew such things were a possibility, but he hoped it would never happen to him. His quirk is too dangerous for that. He tries laying down and it feels like there's sparks in his hands. He's reminded of Bakugo. Maybe this is why he's always angry. It's certainly pissing him off to have his hands feel like matches. You look very uncomfortable. A voice sounds from the doorway. He turns. Aizawa is there, leaning against the door. His teacher is different when he's on duty. That moments from sleep look is absent from him. He greets him and his teacher makes his way in, observing closely. It's my quirk. I know, your control. Let me help. Aizawa looks at him and suddenly the feeling like his hands are about to burst into ice and flames is gone. Your timing is incredible. Aizawa grunts in acknowledgement. It's not a coincidence. I've been here a while. Saw the quirk control nurse rush over here. Oh, thank you, Todoroki says, not sure what else to say. Sensei pauses, his voice low and grumbling. If you see any other illusions, please hit that button. He points to the call button. It could mean that the villain is near. They brought me in since illusion quirks can prove very difficult. Todoroki nods in agreement. I don't think I've seen anything. Good. Get some sleep. The concern is evident even if Aizawa doesn't show it openly, and Todoroki is grateful. The temporary cork on his quirk is calming. It's been hours since he felt like he could just lay down. Aizawa leaves after it's clear he's dozing, and even after he's gone, he feels calmer. A shake of his fingers finds his quirk in a state of peace and control. He lays into bed with ease, keeping the flashes at bay by focusing on his quirk. The abuse from his father over the years has made him very good at compartmentalizing. And he does just that, putting those images in a corner and closing the door firmly shut. Keeping his mind occupied when there's nothing to do is the hard part, so he scans his perimeter, taking note of all the windows and doors, his escape plans, running scenarios where there is an attack or a reason for defense. His mind drifts in this way until it stumbles into his conversation with his sister, her bold encouragement of his feelings. She's kind this way, but he can't help his doubt. Does he really want to tell him? The possibilities are highly varied for the result. Worst case scenario, Midoriya is disgusted. He can't picture this, at least not realistically. It is still definitely a possibility. He might also just react negatively if he has feelings for someone else, which brings him to the scenario he assumes will be the outcome, which is an awkward rejection. Not the worst case, they stay friends for a time, but then their friendship slowly fades into distance from the awkward feeling. He doesn't want that. He would rather maintain the status quo. The last scenario, which he hasn't even thought about, that his feelings are returned, is a baffling one he doesn't expect. His hopes are already none, and he has no interest in raising them, else disappointment is a given. If he's wrong, then he will be pleasantly surprised. He can't quite help it though. The feelings themselves are new, but he's never entertained those thoughts about anyone, never even knew it could be an option for him. So he does run the scenario, just once, with no hope in his mind. Just a fantasy. That Midoriya accepts him, and he is enough. Not sure what to do with his thoughts, he tries to think of something simple, like holding his hand. The image warms him. He wonders if his face is red. It feels like it is a little warm, like he did something mischievous, thinking about it, almost wanting to shield his thoughts in case someone telepathic is listening. And after everything with that villain, those quirks are rare, but mortification at his own thoughts isn't uncommon, let alone if someone else can see them. The image transforms, and he shuts it down before he even gives it a second glance. He doesn't want to look at the villain's grotesque illusions. The more he pretends it was a bad dream, the better. As if his mind wants to flee at the stress of it, he yawns, blinking slowly. He accepts sleep easily, and forgets that nightmares could haunt him. Midoriya has a hard time sleeping. He watches his phone like a hawk. It's unusual for him to receive so many texts in one evening from anyone outside Uraraka. There's messages of concern from Kirishima, Momo, Jiru. Nearly the whole class has blown up his phone. Even Bakugo, who balks every time there's a hint that he's concerned about anyone. Everyone wants to know how Todoroki is doing, and he doesn't know what to say. He ends up replying to all of them similarly. Todoroki's in the hospital recovering. He'll be better soon. It doesn't feel right. Todoroki is probably not fine, though he will physically recover. He wonders how long the effects will linger, what the future side effects will be. Is the villain going to be targeting him in the future? It's not uncommon for heroes to pick up attachments from villains. Then there's his words to think about. He doesn't know what to do with them. Midoriya has scarcely entertained the possibility of romance in his life. He's not that guy. He's the guy who's made fun of for his baby face, his short stature, his quirkless body. And Todoroki is the opposite, the guy who is swooned over nearly everywhere he goes. But Todoroki is also the one who's been through the most of nearly anyone he knows. A lifetime worth of pain already for how young he is. He's come out of it surprisingly well-rounded and gentle in his own way. Todoroki is careful with others in both his words and actions, maybe because he's been through so much pain himself. Todoroki is quiet. He hides himself, but shows it when it's most important. He's also one of Izuku's best friends, and they know each other better than anyone. Over the course of their internship, he's come to know even more. Quiet study sessions together, met his family, seen their dynamic firsthand and how much he's grown in such a short time. For a second, he allows himself to imagine it, being with Todoroki in that way. Holding hands, dates. It's hard to picture. Something about himself seems so plain next to Todoroki. But when he pictures them close, the image is overwhelming in a way he doesn't know what to do about. But it makes him happy, the idea of it. A giddy smile pushes itself onto his face at the thought. He's never had someone like him, that way. And his best friend. He needs more time to think. There's many sides to any relationship, let alone a romantic one. It won't just be all happy times. Is he okay with pursuing another hero? One who will likely be on the front lines of danger right there with him in the coming age. Would it be a distraction from him becoming All Might's successor? He presses in on that. Does he have time to entertain these ideas for anyone, let alone Todoroki? It'll be complicated in more ways than one. He might need to ask All Might if there has ever been anyone for him if he made that choice. Is that choice different because Todoroki would be on the front lines too? It's a lot to process. At the very least, he is sure he returns his feelings in some way, maybe not with the same fervor or certainty right now. But this is the first time he's even considering it. How long has Todoroki been sitting on this? There's the possibility it's all just a slip, something he said while high on medication, and just having seen him in a traumatic environment, he has to keep this in mind. If he gets his hopes up, and then he'll wait for Todoroki to say something before he makes any move. That's what he'll do. Todoroki opens his eyes and feels a comforting warmth around his chest that wasn't there when he went to sleep. He looks down, and there's an arm securely around his chest. Scars line the skin, warm and familiar. "Midoriya, what are you doing? Can't I lie here?" is the muffled reply. There's warmth, skin-on-skin contact with only one explanation. He's dreaming. He lies back down and sinks into that affection that is so temporary. He turns so he's facing Izuku. He looks so sleepy like this. His dreams did a good job. The details are so precise. He reaches out to touch and lays his hand on Izuku's cheek. "Is this okay?" A joyous laugh is the reply. "Of course." Midoriya hums in what is practically a purr, and he nestles into his chest. His heart feels so full, and Todoroki is grateful for such gentle dreams. He hugs him, clutching him tightly like he wants to. If he could. There's a press of lips against his chest, and that has him feeling so warm he's sure his face is red. "What are you?" Dream Midoriya moves up to his neck and presses his lips there. Todoroki shivers, his hands trembling. It's jarring, the amount of sensation from something so simple, addicting and overwhelming. There's a moment, a temptation. Can he? He reaches out to return the touch, and pauses. He's never thought this, not even something like it. He had to push that down, repress any desire for it. It's not like he wasn't dealing with being a hormonal teenager, but relationships, physical closeness, sex, any of it seemed like it was never going to be on the table for him. So he just never thought about it, never even dreamt about it. This Midoriya, he looks close, all sleepiness gone from his system. His muscles tighten and his sleep-addled mind becomes very clear. The clarity that comes with awareness, something is wrong. It's just like before, something about Midoriya is off. His face is just ever so slightly wrong. That warmth in his eyes and awkwardness that emanates from him is so absent. This is not a dream. He smashes the call button. Mount Midoriya raises his head slowly, menacingly. "Ah, darling, you're catching on. Just for your information, I know everything about you." A hand reaching forward, a finger pressed to his nose, teasing. Todoroki is petrified, frozen where his hand is placed on the call button. Midoriya's face starts to melt like plastic, and a shout erupts from him in horror. "Todoroki, what do you see?" A voice says, dark and stern. Suddenly Aizawa is there, distinctly not looking at him yet. Midoriya's face drips onto his lap, and whatever affectionate position he took is replaced with disgust. "I saw," he chokes on the name. He can't say it, because it wasn't him. Not really. It's not him, Todoroki says, breaths coming in harshly. Aizawa says something into a phone. Then he's getting in close and staring at Todoroki harshly. "I'm going to sweep the perimeter," he states after staring for a moment. Todoroki falls out of his bed and stumbles away, leaving the vision of Midoriya's horrific form there. Aizawa grabs his shoulders, steadying him. They're forceful and grounding. "You okay?" Yes, he replies, feeling very much not okay. His stomach is in knots and he can't stop glancing. The vision is so vivid. "You think you can escape me?" Todoroki shivers, and Aizawa watches closely. "The sooner I find him, the sooner you'll feel better. I'll be back. Try not to use your quirk." Where Aizawa entered, Eraserhead quickly leaves in pursuit of the villain. "Todoroki, why don't you come back to bed?" Something close to Midoriya's voice echoes in his ears. Disgust at himself ties itself in his stomach. Because of his infatuation, the villain was able to produce an image like this. Such utter disrespect of his best friend. Or should I say Xiaodo? We are on a first-name basis now, aren't we? The voice is so like and unlike Midoriya, but nonetheless, it has his teeth grinding, the image of him saying words like that, the implication of intimacy between them. He feels like he's already undeserving of his friendship for this violation. He wants to hear the real Midoriya except calling him by his first name, or holding him when he's injured at his bedside. It was not meant for someone to intervene and taint such an image for some mock illusion. Defeated, he closes his eyes and looks away. The feeling of not Midoriya's hands on his shoulders is present even with his eyes closed. How does this quirk work? He knows it's a lie now, but the effectiveness is too strong. Simply looking away isn't enough. He runs. Outside his room, the hospital is in panic. Nurses bustling around to check on patients. Their stricken expressions betray their attempts at ease. They must all know there is a villain outside, wanting something to do with him. Whatever that may be is beyond him. He feels a little guilty that he's the cause of the discomfort. But why pursue him? What purpose does showing him those images serve, other than to drive him mad? What does taking him out of the game gain? The real target could be his father. He's seen it before. Break him down, and his father gets more and more involved. You don't play with Endeavor's tools. Midoriya would probably be able to figure this out better than he could. He's seen his hero notebook once. The detail in it's so incredible you'd think he has an information-gathering quirk. I see, you're thinking of this one again. A warm hand grips his shoulder and dread spreads from the tip of his head to the bottom of his feet. How do you? Just down the hall now, lit dimly in what appears to be an empty blue hallway. It was crowded just a moment ago, wasn't it? There is only one body there now. Midoriya's face is all wrong, but is undeniably his image, contorted in sickening ways. The bones and shapes crooked, as if they were bent out of place. The horror has him shutting his eyes firmly, in the middle of the hospital hallway. It's not real, he iterates desperately. All he wants is to get away, to escape it. How does the villain know his weakness like this? It baffles him to know exactly what makes him tick. Todoroki blinks, and there's a glimpse again. Now his father is behind Midoriya, hands ablaze, aiming for his head. His quirk activates, but he restrains himself. It's not real. His father wouldn't, not anymore at least. Maybe. He has no reason to. Hey kid. It's a nurse's voice, a familiar one. We know what's going on. Will you let us take you back to your room? There's a pounding in his chest, desperate for air. The tightness clutching him as his lungs rise and fall in rapid succession. Can't they see that? I don't know. I'm going to touch your arm. I'm going to guide you back to your room, and we are going to give you something to let you sleep. He doesn't want to sleep, but sleeping is better than seeing this right now. Better than this blind panic that has him feeling cornered. He can still hear the fire of this endeavor, flames dancing, aiming his hands at Midoriya's head. Okay, the warm touch doesn't ground him like it should. Instead, he feels ill, like he's 7 and his dad is dragging him back into the training room for another session after dinner, one where he can't feel his bones and the heat of his father's quirk is blistering. I might be sick, he tells the nurse, walking slowly as he is guided. I'll get you a bag. The nurse steps away, and he hears a scream. Like Midoriya is on fire, but it is distorted, like a fuzzy TV coming in and out of its connection. He blinks and is blessed with a blank room. He shuts his eyes again quickly, just to make sure. The nurse returns and a plastic-like material is placed in his hands shortly after. The sounds fade, and he exhales heavily when the noise goes quiet. Thanks, he says quietly. The rest of the walk to his bed is short and there is only the blackness behind his eyelids. He hopes that means there is nothing waiting for him when he gets there. Okay, lay down. I'm going to administer some medication. It will calm you down. He thought no one had noticed. A few people are on the way to keep an eye on you so you don't have to worry. They reconnect his IV and administer something through the line. I keep seeing, he says, but the medication is already kicking in, relaxing that tight grip he has on the sheets. His eyes open, without his consent, but the boneless feeling in his muscles takes his control away. There is blessedly nothing, just his usual nurse sitting there skeptically. It's helping. The nurse chuckles. Let me know if you need anything else. The heroes are chasing the villain off now, so you shouldn't be getting any more illusions anytime soon. A relief, he exhales and tries to keep that in mind as he looks around the room. How do you know that? The nurse's image is hard to focus on. The impact to every limb is heavy and immediate from the medication. They were all flying just outside the window, but now they've moved on, somewhere a little farther now. He pulls out his phone. Looks like it's a few blocks away according to the hero watch. Todoroki isn't familiar, but it's easy to gather that heroes are likely tailing the villain. Thank you, he repeats, feeling grateful for the relief. You are very polite. He thinks he hears an added on, unexpected for Endeavor's son. He ignores it. He definitely hears them say, rest well. The nurse exits, and though he feels anxious being alone again, he knows his consciousness won't be long. His focus fluctuating. He tries to think about the facts, the clues, but it's all jumbled together with exhaustion in his head. His body and quirk is just too spent. Todoroki is asleep when Midoriya gets to the hospital. He's glad to see him resting, especially with the hospital so hectic with heroes and specialists moving to defend from a possible villain attack. He checks in with 𝗬𝗪's nurse, who indicates that he had a bad morning and that heroes have been active, consistently surrounding the hospital. More illusions were given, and Izuku is at a loss. There is no real reason to pursue Todoroki. He's out for the count, unless he was the original target. The enemy coming in so close just doesn't make sense. His target must be 𝗬𝗪, whether that's to keep number 1 occupied or maybe they're the type who likes to finish what they started. The thought is grim. 𝗬𝗪 nearly died. Likely would have had they not shown up with medical aid. The temperature in his body was hard enough to stabilize. Midoriya tries not to think about it. He already feels the clawing anxiety enough as it is, piling on Todoroki's vulnerable state, the nearing threat, his confession, and on top of all that he has to think about with the League of Villains. It's just too much. There's a ding from his phone. How is he doing? The text from Uraraka is unexpected. He's resting, in bad shape but recovering. What happened? He glances at Todoroki. We're not exactly sure. There should be footage. A location like a bank should have plenty of security cameras. Maybe he can view it and try to get an idea of what's going on. The only conclusion of benefit he can gather from a villain hovering around Todoroki is it keeps the number 1 hero and his sidekicks occupied. It also pulls a lot of heroes towards a single, easy-to-monitor location. Todoroki himself, while powerful, isn't someone the League would target in all likelihood, unless there's a personal grudge. It doesn't matter. He simply needs more information to draw a conclusion. He pulls out his notebook to write some of his thoughts. Maybe it can help the heroes later if he comes up with something. It's a while before he glances up from Todoroki's bedside. But when he does, he finds his friend staring at him, an unreadable expression on his face. Todoroki, hello. How are you feeling? He stutters out, taken aback by his friend's gaze. 𝗬𝗪's eyes narrow, and his hands notably grip the sheets tightly. Midoriya hovers his hands in uncertainty. Is he still seeing things? Are you okay? Do you need me to get a nurse? Are you real? 𝗬𝗪 asks, in barely a whisper, and Midoriya stiffens. Yes, it's okay. I don't think they. Todoroki's hand rises slowly then, trembling slightly, and settles it on Midoriya's cheek. His palm is strangely warm. The sensation has Midoriya startled. He can only take it for a moment before he finds himself jumping back in alarm. Todoroki is hesitant even for hugs to begin with, let alone that. His hand lingers in the air for a moment, then settles it. You're real. Sorry, I needed to be sure. This morning was. He trails off, and while Midoriya fights the enormous blush that must be showing on his face, he draws a conclusion. You saw an illusion of me. Again, Todoroki fidgets, looking down, keeping his eyes from Midoriya. He sighs, yes. Why am I the subject so often? Midoriya mumbles, not intending it to be audible as a question. He knows the reason after all, but Todoroki responds with vigor. Because it's effective. Because he's peeking into my mind. I'm easily fooled perhaps. A sad expression fills his face, and Midoriya tries to meet his eyes. But his eyes stay firmly on the sheets with determination. Another vulnerability. I don't think that's true. Would it be easier if I'm not here? Midoriya asks. He doesn't want to burden 𝗬𝗪 any more than he already has. If removing any confusion from the situation helps, then he can see the wheels turning, weighing the pros and cons. The obvious one being that if Midoriya isn't here, then if he sees him, he knows it's an illusion. Midoriya is weighing the options too, but he doesn't see what 𝗬𝗪 sees. There's no way he can tell the best answer without knowing that. I think that would be worse. What if you do need to contact me? I might doubt you. 𝗬𝗪 eventually answers. I don't want that. Okay, that's a good point. It's likely I'll need to keep in contact with you. He ignores the bit of relief he feels at not being dismissed from his side. If it's okay, can you tell me what's going on in these illusions? 𝗬𝗪's shoulders tense. I'd rather not. Midoriya nods, deciding not to push. What about a secret word? That only you and I know. I'm not sure if that will work. I don't know if he can see into my mind. It seems like he's reading it, or knows me. The thought is scary, that his thoughts may not be safe. Telepathy quirks are rare, but he wouldn't be surprised if something like that could become an illusion quirk. Your records are pretty public with you being the son of number 1. Midoriya responds, the obvious answer. He could have gained quite a bit of knowledge from that. It doesn't explain why he showed me you though. 𝗬𝗪 answers, finally meeting his eyes. How much he seems to know. It terrifies me, but not because it's bothering me. It means he knows a lot about you too. Midoriya hesitates on that. He probably has some of the least substantial public records. What with him being quirkless and no exams of his quirk in his formative years. His family blends in better than anyone in his whole class, maybe even his whole school. But he does have some fame. With his years of UA, could they really gain much from that little bit? Unless Todoroki is right. And thoughts can be read in some capacity. He'll have to be careful what he's thinking about. An impossible task for him. From your perspective, how much does he seem to know? Midoriya asks. He needs to know this at least. He knows things I've never told anyone, things I wasn't. Todoroki grasps his head, bowing to the point where Midoriya is gazing at his hair. It hangs long, blocking sight of his expression. Things only you and I know even. Midoriya stills. He suppresses the urge to reach out and touch, to comfort him. The way his head is bowed, it's hard to resist just placing a comforting palm on his head. Things you've never told anyone. Todoroki nods, despair leaking out of him, filling the room. Midoriya has no explanation, other than the easiest one. This villain can read minds. I know this is impossible to ask, and if I say this now, I also know it could be the worst time to say it if they're listening. But Midoriya pauses, trying to think if there's another way. Somewhere else he can say this that guarantees he's not being listened to. But he has no way of knowing, not quickly. And the heroes were chasing him. He might be on limited time if they lost his trail. ... Be careful what you are thinking. Try not to hold thoughts in your mind too long. If you can try to lead him somewhere with your thoughts, then you'll know. If he can read your mind. Todoroki's face is blank, a sure sign of panic within him. But his control is keenly honed, better than anyone he knows. He will find a way to keep his quirk and mind simultaneously under wraps. He spent years suppressing half his quirk. Thoughts are a whole other problem, but at the very least he has experience. Midoriya has always thought that with the few words Todoroki says, it's obvious he is thinking a great deal. Contrary to himself, who thinks a lot and just lets it flow out of his mouth in the worst idiotic waterfall, Todoroki chooses his words. The words are infrequent and chosen carefully. His face often stoic while his mind is busy. There aren't many people in their class who live behind their eyes like that. He'd have to think it over, if that has some relevance to the effectiveness of the quirk. Heaving of a sigh brings Midoriya back to Todoroki's blank stare and ruffled brow. He pauses, unsure. Another sigh. Bad news then. I think he already has the core information that he needs to make it easy to access my head. He already seems to know a lot. Midoriya can fill in the blanks of what he knows. Todoroki has been seeing him after all. He hates the idea of his image being used as a device to deceive and torture his best friend. How would you tell if someone can go as far as to read your mind? What's the connection between the illusions? How did he know to use that? Is there a connection with all of your visions? Something in common? Todoroki shakes his head and looks away, hand rising to scratch the back of his head. You've been a part of all of them. But you're not quite right every time. Not quite right. Something about you, I think I could tell now. Maybe, if it happens again. That's reassuring. I can try to make it obvious when it's actually me. Midoriya says, as a question. He's not sure how he could do that other than being very himself. Is there a way he would know we are close? Todoroki ponders a moment before speaking. He mentioned you in Bakugo. It was one of the only things he said to me. I reacted. I think, maybe it was obvious. He recognized me so. He could have just guessed, and when he saw it was effective, ran away with it. We can guess maybe he doesn't have the ability to read your mind, just really good intuition. Midoriya says, and an idea forms. If you want to test it, I have an idea. Todoroki has been spinning Midoriya's words around in his mind for hours now, ever since he left. He needs an idea, something to throw the illusion quirk off. But he has no guarantee of when he'll be around or if he'll even come back. It was strange the villain came back in the first place. There's no obvious motive. He hasn't been on the scene long. Not had enough time for villains to build up grudges. The only possible explanation is distracting endeavor. This is doing that with more than a bit of success. Several heroes have been hovering over him. If the mission is a distraction, he's succeeded. With his dad as number one and his teacher with a quirk-canceling ability, if they both are occupied, does that give him free rein? Is he that powerful that the other pro heroes don't prove an obstacle? He's getting stir-crazy just sitting here, sitting and trying not to think. The images are still troublesome, and he's scared to think about things with his best friend. That leaves forcing his mind onto draining topics, like the homework he'll likely have upon his return to school, the latest training he's been missing, how much experience he's missing out on being bedridden during his internship. His legs still have some damage, but they are starting to look normal. Maybe he'll be released tomorrow, and he can focus on other things. The hero news has been playing non-stop for a while now. He's been watching carefully to see what pro heroes are on the move. They've covered some of Endeavor's movements, and they are obviously looking for the illusion villain. The news has been remarking on the surprising combination of heroes on the move. Eraserhead is rarely seen on patrol, especially with a hero like Endeavor close by. They haven't revealed the villain's abilities to the public, but it has been revealed Endeavor's son is in the hospital. It's detrimental to the heroes for the news to reveal such information, especially with the illusion villain likely having connections to the League with their behavior. He never realized that, but it's apparent now that finding him will be difficult with the news practically broadcasting the search. Turning it off with a sigh, he changes the channel to some sitcom he's never watched. He's barely watched any TV other than hero news to begin with. With how his dad is about training, he hasn't had the chance. His dad chooses to walk in that moment, as if summoned by his thoughts. Thought you were on the other side of town. He watches his father warily, trying to anticipate any sign of it being another illusion. Reports are a little delayed. I was there about an hour ago, he answers. Nothing unusual. It doesn't feel off the way the others have. 𝗧𝗪 relaxes slightly. I see. He goes quiet, unsure what to say. His dad, maybe more like 𝗵𝘃𝗲, saw a vulnerable part of him he'd rather not share. Something he'd like to keep to himself. He's been grateful that they haven't had the chance to talk in the past few days. His dad sits beside him, in the same seat Midoriya and 𝗵𝘃𝗲 used. It sets him ill at ease. How are you feeling? Fine, he responds quickly. They may release you tomorrow if your quirk is stable, but they don't want you using it for at least another week. There was a time where his father would ignore such a doctor's instruction. He waits for the impatience, the anger, and is surprised when his father's expression remains neutral. Okay. Silence. His chest hurts. The change is a good thing. But he's wary. He doesn't think he can fully trust his father. He feels like he's waiting for him to flip back. The change was so abrupt. It's still too new for him to really buy that his dad isn't ready to drag him back to training to be the #1 hero again. You should get some rest. Has Midoriya been by? 𝗧𝗪 is surprised again by the question. Yes, he just left. His dad looks puzzled, but nods. Why? No reason. His father shakes his head. The conversation continues to strain with the asking of small questions and 𝗧𝗪 returning them in equally concise answers. Eventually, he quiets, and 𝗧𝗪 sees the end of the conversation coming as his dad slowly becomes 𝗵𝘃𝗲 once again. Have you had any more visions? He asks, his hero persona in full swing as he stands. Other than the one from before, I don't think so. Trying not to think about those visions has become 𝗧𝗪's job. He's made an effort for his head to remain empty, and his eyes clear on what's in front of him. Good. Let me know if anything happens. I will. Left alone again. Now with thoughts of his dad's odd attempts at repairing their disjointed relationship, he lays his head back and finds exhaustion sweeping through him. He's been so tired. He can't remember the last time he slept this much, especially so poorly to top it off. Drifting off, he doesn't linger on any single thought before succumbing to sleep. The doctors do thankfully release him the next day after no further incidents with his quirk. He's sent home to rest. 𝗵𝘃𝗲 and Midoriya are both there for his release. When he reaches outside, the fresh air hits him pleasantly, and he inhales deeply. He felt crazy being so bedridden. He still feels unsteady, but the ability to walk under his own weight has him at ease for the first time in days. His eye catches a spot of green. He's surprised to see Midoriya in his hero outfit instead of civilian clothes. Why is Deku here? He asks with a slight grin. Midoriya matches it. I would have been here anyway, but your dad requested you have a hero escort. Says it's for the internship, but you know, overprotective is not one of the things his dad is usually guilty of. It's so nice of you, Midoriya. We'll get you home safe, Shu, don't worry. 𝗵𝘃𝗲 says, embarrassing him. His sister throws him a wink as she turns away from Deku. His face blazes, but Midoriya doesn't seem to notice. They reach the car and Midoriya does a quick search of the area. Seen anything else? No, clear here. I was doing some research last night and Todoroki can tell he's about to go on his usual mumbling, so he opens the door for him and lets Izuku into the car, so he can continue talking. He forgoes the front passenger seat with his sister and joins Midoriya in the back to listen. His sister makes eye contact with him in the rear view and he stubbornly tries to ignore it. So this villain, I think I found a record on them. I sent it to 𝗵𝘃𝗲 this morning. 𝗧𝗪 is impressed. How did they not find it before? So they only checked villain records, or accounts of crimes related to illusion quirks. I found him on the Hero Network. Midoriya pulls out his phone and opens up what looks like an old hero forum. I'm pretty active on these. Even those who never make it pro will sometimes show up with a search on a specific quirk. I was checking everything I could find on illusion quirks, and your description matches one in particular. He pulls up an image, and the resemblance is there. The young man, red cape likely, about their age. It must have been taken many years ago now. 10 years ago, this man went to school to be a hero. His name is Tanji Kazuo. Has great grades, but other students found him odd. He attended a few tournaments, so there are some records. He eventually dropped out months before graduating. He had some fans. Many were anticipating his quirk to leave a significant impact on the hero world, so there was a lot of buzz in the few months before his dropout. 𝗧𝗪's eyes widen at all the information he's being shown. What looks to be a shy kid, progressing into someone who does loud and grand gestures, who nearly wins several tournaments and has flying colors on his internships. Did you find any information on his exact quirk? Midoriya nods, and he's amazed at how much intel he gathered in such a short time. If he didn't want to be a hero, he'd say Midoriya would be great as some sort of detective. He's sharp in a way that's different from himself, from many others in his class, and he knows where to look for things that others wouldn't check. It says his quirk is 𝗲𝗄𝗏. If he sees an emotion like fear, he can use that as a vehicle to make you see whatever he wants. Though there isn't a lot of detail, that's the general summary. It's also possible his quirk has advanced since then. I don't really see why it would have to be fear he needs to make you see things. Why not any emotion? Very unique. Midoriya devolves into his hushed ramblings from there, and 𝗬𝗪 watches but doesn't interrupt, letting him process all the information. It would make sense. 𝗬𝗪 displayed fear, but a part of him suspects he was seeing things wrong from the moment he stepped onto the scene. Sorry. I should really be keeping a close eye on the outside, Midoriya says abruptly and turns his head to swivel to review their surroundings. Don't worry, I'm keeping an eye on things too, 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝐵 announces from the driver's seat. Todoroki shakes his head. Don't worry, I think he's been only coming when no one is around. I wonder if it's easier to manipulate someone that way. Could be. Hopefully they capture him with this. It would be nice. He hates the waiting, the looming shadow over every interaction. That what if lingers, and he's been trying to keep even more aware of what he's seeing, paying closer attention to how things should be so he is prepared for when things are suddenly out of place. 𝗬𝗪 doesn't know how the illusions work. Not really. It's such a different quirk from his own. It's hard to imagine, but there's no way it's perfect every time. When they get to the house, he reintroduces Midoriya and goes through a few extra rooms he didn't show him last time. His nerves feel tense with him here, like he's bound to slip up and his feelings come tumbling out. Midoriya, on the other hand, looks at ease, a determined set to his shoulders as he pads through the hallways in his childhood home. It feels strange being back here recently. There's a different air to it. It used to be unsettling around every corner, trying to avoid his father's wrath. Now it's just a house, filled with memories that make his heart hurt in a certain way, but the fear is absent in a way it's never been. He wonders if 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝐵 feels the same way. It brings a small smile to his face when he finds her in the kitchen, a strange smile to her face that he hasn't seen here. She must feel the same, that unexpected ease. It's easy when 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝐵 suggests a board game. They end up taking turns in shogi. He sits to watch Midoriya and 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝐵 run the first game. He knows his sister is very good, but he's surprised by Midoriya's skill, even though when he thinks about it, it should have been obvious he would have a natural skill to the strategy elements. Still, he loses his first game, but as someone who is inexperienced, he plays a competitive game. Todoroki goes next against his sister. He thinks he has some of the strategies down now. He's read a few books, but scarcely had the chance to put it into practice. It's relaxing, but for as at ease as he is, they all still flinch when his dad walks in. The instinct to hide the game is still there, and he nearly swipes the board off the table. Midoriya has a hand on his shoulder in support, noticing his reaction, but says nothing other than offering a warm smile. His father is still very much in 𝗵𝗪 as he lumbers into the room. Booming presents and heavy footfalls that sound through the tatami mats. He is emanating heat, still in the process of cooling down from his quirk. His eyes stray to the game for a second, and Todoroki waits to see a sign of the person that a few months ago would have yelled at him for wasting time on something like this. There's no reaction, however, and he continues into the kitchen wordlessly, eyes falling on Midoriya briefly before looking away. Todoroki looks to his friend and finds a furrowed brow and a puzzled expression. What's wrong? 𝗬𝗪 asks. Nothing. Should I wait to ask him for an update? He seemed occupied with something. Midoriya looks hesitant, but he stands anyway and follows into the kitchen. 𝗬𝗪 moves to join him, but his sister sits him back down. Let them talk. Our game isn't over yet, brother, 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝐵 says with a knowing eye. 𝗬𝗪 hesitates. I don't particularly like leaving Midoriya alone with Dad. I don't blame you. I don't think any of us particularly like leaving anyone alone with him. But it's okay. They are working towards the same goal. Her eyes are soft and understanding as she says this. She was no stranger to father's cruelty. All of them were subject to it in some form. It reminds him of his mother, how worried she must be right now. Maybe he can visit her when this is all over. They are. Midoriya is a student of the 𝗵𝗲𝗏 agency too. He hesitates. Don't like it. Midoriya has been very guarded with him, but not unkind. He's smart, a sweet boy. 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝐵 smiles and moves her silver general. It's surprising that father trusts him. He personally asked Midoriya to protect you. 𝗬𝗪 feels his face heat. His father most definitely knows some component of the things 𝗬𝗪 saw, some inclination of where his affection lies with his best friend. Are my feelings so obvious even Dad knows? Maybe, I don't think so. He's not really observant of that sort of thing. 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝐵 comments. 𝗬𝗪 moves his rook. That's a relief. Either way, he's approved of, especially as All Might's direct prodigy. Things have certainly changed a lot in a very short time. 𝗬𝗪, she moves her rook in turn. He replies with his knight. They have. It doesn't make any sense when he thinks about it. There was no obvious trigger, just a sudden and abrupt change in behavior. He still feels like he can't trust it to last. Checkmate makes itself apparent on his board, and 𝗵𝘃𝗻𝐵 smiles, seeing it too. I think you've won, 𝗬𝗪. He makes his final move of the game. The ride to the Todoroki household gave Midoriya a lot of time to think. He's not sure how he feels about everything. His hand hesitated in hitting the call button to All Might last night, but he ended up thinking perhaps it's better he keep it to himself. Uraraka was also a thought briefly, but ultimately explaining everything to her seemed like an even worse idea. Then there was Kaken, who he easily scrolled past on his phone. Sitting in the car there with 𝗏𝗏 felt normal despite his thoughts the previous night. He assumed it would make things awkward, but as he informed him of everything he found only the usual ease with Todoroki. In hindsight, he's grateful he had the chance to deep dive the case. He had done some serious digging, and it's not the first time he's been grateful for his otaku hero connections. Fanbases rarely die, and the number of fanbases for niche heroes is infinite, and the #1 most common occupation for a villain is a former hero. He's shocked no one found it before him. It's why he follows Endeavor into the kitchen after their shogi game. He doesn't understand how he found out this information first. Endeavor's expression is pensive, eyes staring into the middle distance as he pours himself some water. Midoriya, thank you for escorting him here, Endeavor says on a heaving sigh. It was no problem. Midoriya replies easily. He wanted to be in the car regardless of whether he was assigned or not. The fact that Endeavor specifically asked him after he provided the information was good enough. Did you find anything on the identity I gave you? Another heaving sigh. We did. I know him. My former enemies ... They think my weakness is to attack my children. It's not an uncommon thing, especially for really strong heroes. So many give up kids, a romantic relationship, everything just for a chance to be a hero to the people. Midoriya is one of those people. He'd give anything. Endeavor chose not only to have them, but to raise them with a single-minded goal. It's hard to imagine a quirk marriage in this day of age, especially one with the potential for such high publicity. And the fact that it has remained in secret for so long is the real surprise. Anyone who would investigate Endeavor for a weakness, they'd find many. But at the surface, his kids are his only blatant weakness, the only obvious target outside the man himself. It's the obvious target. I'm sorry this is happening, Midoriya tells him. He's more than sorry. He's scared. Their family is in a fragile state, having just fended off an attack on Natsuo not long ago. More than that, he can't help but resent his current mentor. His past mistakes are too far dire. What did you find on him? I arrested him shortly after his high school career went bad. I had my own agency. I was ... wasn't careful with many of my cases then. It was a bad time for me and my family. Midoriya nods. He only knows the barest inclination of the loss of 𝗏𝗏's brother. It isn't mentioned and isn't talked about, but 𝗏𝗏 has hinted at the information before. Alternatively, it could have been around the time his mother scarred him. Either event would have left a toll on the whole family. I didn't handle it well. This is probably ... some kind of vengeance for that. He went to jail, but not for that long. Who knows where this guy has been for the last couple years. So he is after Todoroki on behalf of his father. It was one of the obvious theories, but it's sad to hear the truth of it. There will likely always be ghosts from Endeavor's past in some form for 𝗏𝗏. It's a twisted reality. It's the kind of thing Midoriya wants to consider before he decides anything. Would getting closer make things even more difficult for 𝗏𝗏? Or could he protect him easier? 𝗏𝗏 isn't the only one with a target painted on his back. Endeavor looks defeated, much more like Enji Todoroki despite his hero costume. Don't worry, sir. We'll find him. I promise I won't let any harm come to him again. As he says it, it feels like a false promise. He's thought of everything, but a villain who can access a mind from far away. It's a difficult problem with no obvious solution. He's told Todoroki what he can do to counter it, but there is no guarantee his theories hold any weight. Endeavor nods weakly. I will do the same. I should get back out there. Hold on. He looks like he'll fall over the second he steps out the door. You need to rest first. You can't find him running on empty. Endeavor glares at him. He's right, you know, 𝗏𝗏 says from the entranceway. Mayumi lingers behind, looking hesitant. I'm fine. You can sleep a full 8 hours. You were just in the hose, Endeavor booms, cutting himself off. Everyone but 𝗏𝗏 withers at the sound. Endeavor tries again, quieter, apprehensive. You were just in the hospital. You are not fine. 𝗏𝗏 moves sometimes like a predator, pacing like a big cat deciding whether or not to hunt. He's agitated, but in a calculating way. It's a trait wholly unique to him. Midoriya thinks it's something spawned out of confrontations not unlike this. I want you to rest. You're exhausted. I'm telling you I'm fine. Even if I'm not, I'm less fine if you decide to be reckless on my behalf. Pretty sure this was in one of your lessons. The mention of the lessons makes Endeavor bow his head, not unlike a form of cowering beneath his son's gaze. It's a strange display. If Midoriya hadn't observed his recent behavior, he'd doubt the authenticity of the action. But Endeavor seems loath to remember how he was mere months ago. Fine, he grunts. Fine, 𝗏𝗏 retorts. The confrontation over, Endeavor retreats to his bedroom. The same powering footfalls strangely soft and quiet after the confrontation. They don't say anything for a second. Todoroki breaks the silence. Villain is after me because of him? Midoriya nods. 𝗪𝗪 nods in turn. All right. Complete acceptance. There's anger there too. Midoriya knows this. And yet, 𝗪𝗪's outlook has been so drastically different since that day, at the tournament. He is unfazed by this, and he takes these things in stride along with his past. Complete acceptance of how things are, rather than despair of how they should be. He's in awe sometimes. His chest clenches painfully just looking at the strong expression 𝗪𝗪 wears now. Eyes straight ahead, burning that icy blue. As if he felt no fear towards his father. Midoriya knows that's there, right next to the apprehension, and the memories that lurk beneath his solemn expression. Are you okay? Midoriya finds himself asking. It feels like the wrong thing to say. He's torn between letting him have that strength and wanting to let it out. Let him be as he is. He cuts himself off. Let's just sit for a bit. They move to sit in front of the television. 𝗪𝗪 makes no move to turn it on and Midoriya allows the silence. He tries not to stare, but his concern brings his gaze to Todoroki repeatedly. I'm sorry. I still don't know what the right thing to say is. I think I knew he was after me because of my dad. It was the one obvious conclusion, Todoroki says, voice low. This is supposed to be your .. our internship. Instead you're stuck babysitting me. Midoriya is shaking his head before he's even finished. This is as much learning as anything else. Either way, I'm grateful I can be here. It beats sitting in the dorms worrying about you. Todoroki's cheeks flush slightly at that. Still, remember when you came for me and Hasu? Midoriya reminds him. He'll never forget it. That moment of relief, when the exact person he wanted was there to save him. Todoroki was already an incredible hero, but that day he became one of his heroes. This isn't even. You came without questioning it. You could have died. Me and 𝗪𝗪 would both be dead if it weren't for you. If you are ever in danger, I want to be there. There has to be a way for him to get this through. Todoroki's posture is still stiff, as if he can't accept it. That uncomfortable guilt still weighing on him. Midoriya needs to take it away. He already owes him too much for him to bear it. Todoroki, I'd be dead if it weren't for you. Finally, 𝗪𝗪 meets his eyes. Since the sports festival, I feel different. I think the me you know now would be dead, had it not been for you. So we can keep saving each other whenever we need it. Deal, Midoriya says, and extends his hand. The smile that lifts 𝗪𝗪's face has Midoriya making one in turn. It's ridiculous, but Todoroki's hand extends. Fine, but I'm saving you next time. Todoroki shakes his hand, slow and lingering. Let's hope next time isn't too soon. The grin touching Todoroki's face is rare, and the silence that ensues after is pleasant rather than weighted. The night moves quickly after that. They settle in on a movie, some hero documentary. It drones on in a pleasant way. Midoriya hasn't seen any of the recent stuff, so he finds himself captivated. By the time they are halfway through the film, he notices 𝗪𝗪 is asleep. He must have been dozing the whole time. The doctors said he'd be tired for a few weeks from his quirk overuse. It's hard to tell his body is still recovering. He's acting like normal. He's grateful Todoroki feels okay enough to move about. But he needs to remember that his friend is still weakened. If something happens, he can't rely on him this time. It's important he stays alert. When the movie ends, he shuts it off and contemplates carrying Todoroki to his room, except he doesn't exactly know where that is. Midoriya. Todoroki's groggy voice sounds. Do you want to head to bed? Midoriya asks softly. Yeah. We need to find where you're sleeping first. Don't worry about me, I can sleep anywhere. Midoriya grins. He's supposed to be guarding. He's wondering if he even should be sleeping. 𝗪𝗪 gives him a stern look. Let me see. They make their way down the halls. And Todoroki stops in the second room. This is my room. Let me see if we have a spare. He pauses when he opens the door. Oh, I guess you're sleeping with me. Two unusually large futons are set up side by side, and several blankets set aside. I guess that makes things easier. Todoroki grumbles about something he can't make out. He has a faint idea, and he hopes his cheeks don't give away the slight embarrassment. He hasn't had a sleepover since before he was diagnosed quirkless. The added thoughts on feelings don't help his nerves at all either. Regardless, he quickly gets to work setting up the bed. Todoroki no longer seems groggy and instead seems to be not meeting his eyes. His cheeks do look a little flushed. Something about it makes Midoriya feel a little better. He's not the only one feeling this way. They settle in. The Todoroki bathrooms are impeccably clean, as is the rest of the house. Midoriya feels almost bad for using anything. He doesn't want to disturb the pristine placement of every utensil. There's something intimate about watching 𝗪𝗪's bedtime routine. It's not like he's never seen him at night in the dorms, but something about the way it's such a personal setting. His own personal bedroom, the way he moves, it's in the way he brushes his teeth and settles into the covers like a cat. Small little details he didn't know about before. 𝗪𝗪 is fidgety when he tries to get comfortable. The large futons suddenly seem not so large. 𝐒𝐲𝐽 isn't very far from where their eyes meet. A futon's length seems suddenly so much closer than it was before. He tries not to think too hard about it. I've never really had anyone over for a sleepover. Do you need anything? 𝐒𝐲𝐽 asks from where they stare across the futon. I'm fine. Me either, well, at least not that I remember really. Midoriya settles into the covers. I'm not really sure about the protocol for sleepovers, though I guess this is more of a guard job. I feel like I should be standing watch by the window or something. That's stupid. You haven't got any rest today either and you were up early. 𝐒𝐲𝐽 says, we've never really had guests spend the night very often, so I think all of us don't really know. It's sad to hear that none of them really got to experience a normal childhood. Not that Midoriya would call himself normal either. He didn't really have friends over, but his mom had friends over now and then. You guys are doing great so far. A thought enters his mind. Maybe sometime when we are not in the middle of a crisis we can have a real sleepover. It seems bold to ask for him, especially given what he knows about 𝐒𝐲𝐽 now. I'd love to, though it'll be hard to find a time when there's not some kind of crisis. He laughs at that. Class 1A doesn't have a great track record, do they? Todoroki's smile is small and private. We really don't. What will be next? Maybe Bakugo will lose his provisional license for talking back to the wrong person. Honestly, I'm surprised his outbursts haven't gotten him in trouble yet. It's only a matter of time, Todoroki says on a yawn. I'm honestly surprised he hasn't busted down the doors to this house. I wonder if Endeavor gave him some other assignment. Midoriya ponders. He knows Kaken must be stir crazy. Todoroki nods sleepily in agreement. He would have definitely busted down the doors by now. Or blown up my phone. Endeavor must have him searching. Todoroki's reply comes slow. That's good. It's important to keep him occupied at a time like this. Midoriya agrees with a nod. Todoroki's blinks from across the futon are getting shorter and shorter. Again, he's reminded of a cat, the way he's curled into the blankets. Cute. Midoriya smiles easily at him. Good night. Good night. It's the middle of the night. Todoroki's eyes open wide to Midoriya's messy green hair beside him. A sight he finds soothing, and there's a calmness that he's never had in this house before with his best friend beside him. The thought of them having a real hangout here brings a pleasant feeling to his chest. He's excited. He'd like to have a real experience like that. The looming threat over their heads isn't what he wants to remember the next few days by. He'd rather remember when a friend stayed the night at his home for the first time. He wonders if Natsuo or Mayumi ever had this experience. Maybe he can ask them for advice. Midoriya is completely out beside him, eyes closed and expression slack. He hasn't seen him sleep before. It turns something in his chest tight. Affection. Still, he isn't used to knowing the feeling. He looks away. There's a tickling feeling in the back of his throat. He doesn't feel uneasy when he goes to the kitchen to get water. He was afraid to leave his room as a kid, terrified that his father would come in from a night patrol and need to blow off some steam, or see his son and think it was the perfect time for a lesson. I've caught you off guard. You need to master this 𝐒𝐲𝐽, he would say. Instead, Todoroki grabs a glass, and for once doesn't find himself glancing down the hallway. He thinks of Midoriya in his room, and the way their soft conversations make his heart race and hurt at the same time. He's not used to feeling nervous around his friend, but it's a good kind, he thinks. 𝐒𝐲𝐽. His father's voice echoes behind him, familiar in the worst ways. 𝐒𝐲𝐽 turns slowly. His father has changed, he reminds himself, but he knows that tone all too well. He stares his dad down hard. There's a challenge in father's eyes. It says Todoroki does not back down from any fight, but 𝐒𝐲𝐽 has no idea what the fight is now. A firm hand grasps his arm and tugs fiercely. He's suddenly a kid again, getting dragged down the halls to the training room. The glass he held shatters on the floor as he goes. He pulls back. His dad's not supposed to be like this anymore. It seemed that way, things seemed better. But the grip is firm and familiar, and he never successfully broke away, not even once, when father got hold of him. He's thrown into the room and he backs up. His quirk still feels wrong. Not quite tuned to how he expects it. He stopped being afraid of his father a long time ago in this room, but with his quirk out of sorts there's fear there. He can't fight back. Endeavor's expression says he's going to beat his control back into place. Fire comes his way fast and he rolls out of the way, muscle memory taking over. He's dodged these moves thousands of times, with or without a quirk. What happened? What changed? He tries to think. His father looked remorseful in a way he's never seen before this afternoon. When he brought up the training, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, this room would never be used like this again. That this room would never be filled with that hate and anger that drove his father for years. It's there now, in every line in his face. Except, something is not quite right. Another wave of flames shoots towards him. He goes to activate his ice but finds instead of a wall, a group of icicle spikes emerge. His control is worse than he thought. The tatami mats hit his knees, again and again as he dodges. He's winded already, the weakness in his limbs still prevalent. The heat is there, the flames are there. But he knows, it's not real. Todoroki starts to shout and hopes someone hears him. No one's here, 𝗧𝗪𝗧. Just you and me, father says, his quirk ablaze and burning with heat. It can't be him, but still he acts on instinct and rolls. Will he burn if he is hit? Everything else from the other illusions indicates that he will, somehow. He doesn't want to tempt it. A memory, he told 𝗵𝗲𝗏 off today. Could this be that? The straw that broke his father's limited patience? Did he just decide to regress that easily? He doesn't want to believe it. There is only one way to be sure. Carefully, he tries to empty his mind and lets one image fill it. His father, palm alight, placing it over his unscarred face. A memory, a moment. He lets that one image occupy his thoughts as he dodges and rolls, trying so carefully to think of nothing else. 𝗵𝗲𝗏 speeds towards him, and in his weakened state he fails to dodge. The grasp on him is tight. He forces himself to calm, no matter how real it feels. Then, his hand alights and comes over his face. 𝗵𝗲𝗏's expression is all wrong, vindictive and wrathful. And he knows for a fact this isn't his father. It hurts, but it is nothing like the truth, nothing like when his mom poured boiling water over his face. The image pauses then, father's burning hand over his face. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 nearly smiles as the pain fades. The villain's realization apparent in the illusion itself. Midoriya's idea worked. The illusion is frozen in place. But as Todoroki resists, he feels like he can start to see reality. The room is actually empty, and sound is slowly coming back into focus. Midoriya is shouting his name behind the door. It's locked. Quickly, he breaks free and there's nothing else in the room with him for a moment. He tries to go to unlock the door, but then the room is spinning so fast he collapses in nausea. You figured it out this time, have you? That won't work twice, you know. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 feels nauseous at the spinning. Kazuo standing in front of him as he was at the bank. Suit untouched, mask the very same. This isn't real, 𝗧𝗪𝗧 states simply. He closes his eyes and exhales. The man can simulate sight and sound, and enter his mind as he pleases. Images that he knows aren't his own fill them, but it's surface level, like he's reading a book and the images flow in and out. He easily dismisses them. There's a sound of a door unlocking, and suddenly the vision is gone. He collapses on the training room floor, legs shaking, dripping sweat. Ice occupies a few corners of the room. It looks not unlike the aftermath of the old training sessions used to be. Dad and Midoriya are in the entranceway, staring at him with wide eyes. There's a look in his father's that he hasn't seen before, a knowledge of what 𝗧𝗪𝗧 saw. It worked, Midoriya, he says, out of breath. I can tell now. Midoriya's eyes fill with tears at that and he rushes to him, folding him into a protective embrace. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I said I'd be here but I didn't know and I heard the glass break and couldn't find you. It's okay. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 interrupts him. I snuck out while you were sleeping. You didn't do anything wrong. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 tries to stand, but he's still too weak from his previous injuries, and Midoriya ends up supporting the majority of his weight. Todoroki steps to his side, some unnamed emotion in his eyes, something pained, and he places a reassuring hand on his head. I'm sorry. 𝗧𝗪𝗧's eyes widen. He nods. I know. It's how he knew, suspected none of it was real. He wanted to believe his dad had changed for the better, that he was genuinely trying to change things. Flames burst from his father's shoulders. I'm going to go see if he's still on the property. Keep an eye on him. 𝗵𝗲𝗏 leaves in a wave of intense heat, leaving him leaning on Midoriya for support. You should go with him, 𝗧𝗪𝗧 tells him. There's a chance we'll catch him here. Izuku shakes his head fiercely. I'm not leaving you alone again. It wasn't so bad. Your idea worked. You're a genius, Todoroki tells him. Without his idea he'd have no way of knowing for sure if what he was seeing was real. Midoriya starts guiding him down the hall, his grip firm on his side. Todoroki leans into the contact. Except, now we know he can read your mind, and anybody's mind he gets close enough to. Midoriya says, voice cracked and panicked. It's only now he notices. Midoriya looks scared in a way he hasn't seen before. I don't think he can get anything he wants from my mind. Maybe he doesn't have unlimited access. He didn't realize the underlying reason I showed him. What I showed him, just decided it was something I was afraid of. Maybe he has to sort through it, like he can see or hear what's on the surface, but doesn't have an underlying understanding. That's what it seems like. Midoriya still looks uneasy, like he wants to run. It's not an expression he's ever seen on his friend. Are you okay? I think I should be asking you that, Midoriya says, and he gently lowers him onto the couch in the living room. I'll go get you water. Why is Midoriya scared? It's not for him this time. That much is clear. Midoriya. He returns slowly and places the water in front of 𝗧𝗪𝗧. It's apparent he was only scared after he realized that the villain can read minds. Is there something ... Are you? You seem really frightened. He doesn't know how to ask. Midoriya seems to understand what he's trying to say. 𝗧𝗪𝗧 thinks he already knows. Midoriya is hiding something, holding important secrets. His first thought is something related to All Might. They are unusually close, to the point their relation has been speculated on in their whole class. There's a long pause. He can see the cogs turning in Midoriya's mind. Is there somewhere where we can talk that? that there's no chance we could be overheard. Midoriya whispers, and has only seen him like this once before. A weight in his eyes. It was like after they rescued 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗏. But he already has access to your mind. Midoriya groans, clearly torn. There's a basement. But Midoriya, if you are going to tell me a secret, I don't think. Not right now. I'm sorry, I can't. We know Kazuo has access to your thoughts. But after this is all over, after he's caught, I'll tell you. Todoroki nods. You don't have to tell me if you can't. Midoriya is the most trustworthy person he's ever met. He trusts him with anything. If he's this torn about it, perhaps it isn't his secret to tell. I want to tell you, but it's very dangerous. Midoriya states with pain in his voice. Will you be okay? If this guy finds out, he can just as easily read your mind as he does mine. Probably. If he's with the League, it doesn't matter. I just won't think about it. That doesn't sound good coming from him. Midoriya is generally optimistic and positive even in the worst of situations. If he's worried enough to openly wear such a torn expression, it must be bad. Thoughts aren't exactly something he can control all the time either. If you are in that much danger, Midoriya shakes his head. I'll be fine. Don't worry. I'll tell you when this is over. There's a silence where Midoriya's expression doesn't offer any more conversation on the topic. Instead, he sits beside him, leaning close and bumping his shoulder. I'm not the one who is being targeted here. Midoriya heaves a sigh. Are you all right? Are you in any pain? I know you're not supposed to use your quirk. I'm fine. He just showed me the stuff with my dad. The old training room. It was nothing I couldn't handle, Todoroki says. It's true, of all the visions he's had, this one wasn't anything compared to the others. The age where his dad would drag him into that room wasn't long ago. He'd gotten used to it for years. Just because it hadn't happened in a while didn't lose that muscle memory. You shouldn't have to handle any of it. It's messed up what your dad did to you. You shouldn't have to go through it again, Midoriya declares vehemently. The heat in his eyes on his behalf is not unfamiliar. 𝗬𝗪 still isn't sure what to do with Midoriya's care. Thank you, 𝗬𝗪 replies simply. He knows it's messed up, but he's grateful someone finally knows. Someone finally gives a shit. For what? Caring, I guess. Midoriya sputters a laugh. Please don't thank me for that. That's the bare minimum. It doesn't seem like the bare minimum to me. It's nice that you know about it all. It has been easier for a long time now to not be so angry at him when I have you around. Midoriya's face reddens. It's okay if you're still angry, you know. More than actually. I know, but I don't really want to be. Being angry all the time. I felt so lonely and exhausted. I don't know how 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗏 keeps it up. He remembers, before the sports festival, with as much as he hated his fire, he felt like it was around him all the time. Like it was burning under his skin. Maybe he had bottled it all up, all the anger, and when he finally let his fire out, it was like he suddenly had an outlet for it, an understanding of it more than before. Midoriya chuckles. I can understand that. I don't think I can either. I just get sad, I think. 𝗵𝘃𝗀𝗏 on the other hand that's his default setting. A constant defense mechanism. You know, that actually makes sense. Todoroki says. Definitely a defense mechanism. No one has that kind of energy, especially with our training routines. The thought takes him somewhere different. Todoroki groans. I'm not looking forward to getting my body back up to speed. I'll help you. We can do it together. You can join me on my morning runs. Midoriya looks absurdly bright as he says this. The morning. Todoroki bows his head in despair. The mornings are hard, Midoriya. Would you prefer a night run? Yes, actually, immensely. He likes the idea. The morning often has him sluggish until he's consumed caffeine or forced himself into a workout. But a run in the evening sounds almost pleasant. It's not often they get to leave after curfew. Then we'll run at night. Midoriya agrees. We do have a curfew. I'll get permission. Or we can sneak out. Midoriya grins deviously. He forgets that Midoriya isn't afraid to break the rules. I forget that we've gotten in trouble for a lot worse sometimes. Todoroki muses. He has a rebellious streak from defying his father for so long. But Midoriya has it from his simple determination to be a hero regardless of what it takes. Me too. I used to never get in trouble. Now it feels like I'm always a problem. Midoriya shakes his head. I never mean to, it just happens. You always try to do the right thing, even if it puts you at risk. It's a very heroic trait, though I will say I wish you'd consider your own safety more. You too, you know. Most of the times I've broken the rules, it's been with you. Midoriya is smiling as he says this, fond and soft. His expression feels tender. For a second, 𝗬𝗪 hopes. I'm glad it's been with you. Who else could I trust to have my back? The fondness in his friend's expression has him pause. The moment feels different, charged in a way he can't describe. He wonders if he should admit his feelings, here and now. The moment feels right, but something has him hesitating. He still hasn't thought about it, not really. With Midoriya around, he can't let his thoughts linger too long on the idea, or he gets flustered. But Midoriya is sitting close and everything about his body language screams hesitant. Like Midoriya is thinking about his next action as much as he is. He still doesn't understand the way his chest clenches painfully as Midoriya gently reaches for his hand. I'm glad to, Todoroki. I wouldn't want it to be with anyone else. 𝗧𝗪, he blurts and nearly covers his mouth. What? Midoriya meets his gaze in surprise. You can call me 𝗧𝗪, if you're okay with that. He has no idea what he is doing, but he's determined. He'd much rather hear Midoriya say his first name. Okay, 𝗧𝗪. Well then call me by my first name too. It's only fair. He can feel the blush on his cheeks. Midoriya must notice. I will, Izuku. Some part of him feels that hope explodes inside of him. To the point, he almost wants to state his feelings. But there's still no way to know, and it is the only thing that has him bite his tongue. With the swirl of affection in his chest, 𝗧𝗪 starts to feel his quirk start to react. He quickly removes his hand. Sorry, my quirk control is still not the best. I don't want to burn you. It's okay. Do you need anything? We can go back to sleep or I can stay up with you. Whatever you want. I think I'm okay. It will calm down. It will calm down even more if he isn't having heart-to-hearts constantly with his best friend. They've never had time to talk this much. He's not sure he's talked this much with anyone, except maybe his mother. It makes that feeling go into overdrive, like his whole body is going to burst into flames from the intensity. I promise I'll do better next time. Can you wake me up next time? Midoriya's expression is pleading, but he doesn't want to wake Midoriya if he's asleep on the off chance he sees something. You didn't do anything wrong. He's gotten away with it a few times now, even with pro heroes nearby. Either his range is incredible or he knows he won't be caught, Todoroki adds. And it's some more obvious information that does nothing to reassure him. He wonders even now if he can trust everything he sees. He hopes he can, because everything about Izuku looks right. He wants to hold on to the interactions they've had, rather than cast them into suspicion. Maybe both. Hopefully Endeavor's caught him. But I'm sure it's hard catching someone who can manipulate anything you see, Midoriya comments as they return to the bedroom. The nighttime moonlight casting a glow upon his features. It makes his friend look more mature somehow, and a chill runs up his arms. He's not going to catch him. He's managed to come this close twice already without getting caught. But can you tell me if you're going to do something alone? I want to be able to help. It seems like he knows when there's no one around so he can plant the illusion. The puppy eyes don't help anything. And he has a point. 𝗧𝗪 sighs heavily. You may be right. I'll try. Midoriya nods, seeming reassured. He doesn't want to worry him. If extra monitoring will help, he'll do it. Though he has no idea how long Midoriya is here for. Is he staying another day? How long did my dad order you to stay for? He told me to keep an eye on you. I decided that's what I'm doing until this is over. Midoriya states like it's obvious. That could be a while. Or it could not, if you want me to leave. No, just curious. 𝗧𝗪 interrupts quickly. He's grateful for the time together. Then, until it's over, the covers go over Midoriya's shoulders, accenting the determination in his brow. Good night. Don't hesitate to wake me if... I know, he says, interrupting him the second time. Good night, Izuku. He smiles as he says his first name, and even in the dark, he can see how the name flusters Midoriya. Go, good night, 𝗧𝗪. He smiles victoriously. But you already said good night. Shut up.